Welcome back. This is a place for quiet stories from the wizarding world. The paths canon never walked. The choices that might have changed everything. Here, we take a single moment and turn it slightly. We follow the consequences slowly, carefully, year by year. If you enjoy these long, immersive journeys into alternate magic, consider subscribing and settling in. Now, let's start. The fire is low and blue in the grate, throwing strange shadows over silver instruments that tick and whir on every shelf. A small boy is curled in an oversized armchair, glasses sliding down his nose, a picture book of famous witches and wizards slipping from his hand as he dozes. Above him, Fawkes hums a soft, aching melody, feathers glowing in the half-dark. Across the room, Albus Dumbledore marks essays in green ink, pausing every so often to glance up and make sure the child is still breathing evenly. What if this is Harry Potter's normal? What if the first lullaby he remembers is a phoenix song, not the rumble of a cupboard door and an uncle's shout? What if the boy who lived grows up under Dumbledore's direct gaze instead of Vernon Dursley's fist and Petunia's silence? In this room, there are no locked cap flaps, no spiders in the dark. There are talking portraits who argue over bedtime, and a transfiguration professor who drops by with transfigured wooden soldiers that march themselves back into their box. This changes everything. Not because Hogwarts is softer than Privet Drive, but because the most powerful wizard of the age looks at a blood-stained prophecy, at a sleeping toddler, and says, "I will take responsibility." In this timeline, Dumbledore does not leave Harry on a suburban doorstep, with only a letter and a hope that Petunia's resentment can be twisted into protection. He invokes his authority as magical guardian, claims the child outright, and tucks him into a narrow bed in the staff wing, under wards woven into stone older than the ministry itself. So, let's explore what that means. A childhood where home is the headmaster's office and the corridors of Hogwarts, where house elves sneak extra treacle tart to the boy who lived, and Hagrid's giant hands are the ones that lift him onto a broom for the first time, where McGonagall corrects his posture over tiny quills, and Snape, forced into proximity, cannot quite pretend Harry is a stranger. What happens when Harry learns basic charms before he learns long division? When the sorting hat is not his first real conversation with magic, but only the latest. This isn't a story about Dumbledore simply being nicer. It's a story about power, proximity, and intention. Is he raising a beloved grandson, a living symbol the wizarding world can rally around? Or a weapon honed from infancy to meet a prophecy he cannot bear to ignore? When the boy in the armchair is both child and chess piece, how does that shape every lesson, every secret withheld, every moment of love Dumbledore allows himself to show? This Harry will not arrive at 11 starved for affection and ignorant of his fame. He will know the castle's hidden staircases before he knows the Muggle alphabet. Will hear fragments of order business through half-closed doors. Will grow up breathing the politics of magical Britain with every meal in the staff room. Does that make him safer? Or does it simply paint a brighter target on his back? Across this episode, we'll walk that entire altered timeline with him, from nursery years in the staff quarters, to a first year where Hogwarts is already home, to a final battle fought by a boy who has never known a world without Dumbledore's shadow. We'll see how this single decision doesn't just make things kinder. It makes them stranger, riskier, and far more complicated than canon ever allowed. The night on Privet Drive that never was. To understand that shadow, we have to go back. Back before nursery cots in staff quarters. Back before first-year feasts. Back to Godric's Hollow, and then to that dark, quiet street called Privet Drive. In canon, this is where the story hardens into inevitability. A ruined cottage, a crying baby, Hagrid's motorbike, McGonagall's long vigil as a tabby cat, and Dumbledore calmly insisting that Lily's blood will protect what his wards cannot. He leaves Harry on a doorstep because anonymity and blood magic, he believes, are worth a childhood of not belonging. The cupboard is the price of survival. But what if that certainty cracks? What if, in this timeline, Dumbledore stands on Privet Drive, listens to McGonagall describe a day of Vernon's rants about abnormality and Petunia's cold dismissal of her sister, and actually lets himself believe her? What if he looks at the bruised future he's about to consign Harry to and cannot, in good conscience, do it? This is the divergence point. His hand hovers over the blanket, over the letter that explains and excuses everything. And then he doesn't put Harry down. Canon logic says blood wards, distance, humility through neglect. In this alternate logic, he does the arithmetic differently. Yes, Lily's sacrifice can be anchored in Petunia, but at what cost? Is magical protection worth years of casual cruelty, of hunger, of being told you are a burden and a freak? This changes everything. Not because Hogwarts is safer than a suburban street, but because Dumbledore decides that being wanted is itself a form of protection. So he chooses the lesser risk. He invokes his authority as magical guardian, bypasses Petunia entirely, and brings Harry to the only place he truly trusts, Hogwarts. The castle becomes nursery and fortress, classroom and home. Harry grows up not in Muggle poverty and emotional deprivation, but in a world where portraits argue over who gets to read to him and house elves sneak him extra treacle tart. Emotionally, that means something profound. This Harry is spoken to, not shouted at. He is looked at with pride, not contempt. When he levitates a quill at 5, McGonagall doesn't scream. She claps once, sharply, and corrects his wand grip. Growing up, he learns that power is not a shameful secret to be hidden in a cupboard, but a responsibility watched over by the greatest wizard of the age. Trust for him is not an impossible luxury. It's the air he breathes. But because he is Dumbledore's ward, he is never anonymous. There is no hiding the boy who lived when he is literally being raised in the Headmaster's orbit. Every visiting governor, every ministry delegation, every ambitious parent sees the child in the corner of the office and calculates. Hogwarts is sanctuary, yes, but it is also a political stage, and Harry is placed at its center before he can walk. This isn't a story about simple wish fulfillment. Harry trades the invisibility of a cupboard for the scrutiny of a pedestal. He will never wonder if he matters. He will wonder if he is anything more than a symbol or a weapon. And that question, once planted on Privet Drive and carried into the castle, is going to haunt every year of his life, especially when he finally learns who decided his fate that night and why. From cupboard to castle, reframing Harry's origin story. But what if that question never had a cupboard behind it at all? What if the boy who wonders whether he's a weapon grows up not in a locked, airless box, but in a castle full of voices, constantly reminding him he is a child first and a symbol second? Canon Harry arrives at Hogwarts underfed, underloved, and hypervigilant, reading danger in every raised voice because for 10 years, danger has meant Dudley's fists or Vernon's belt. He flinches from praise, hoards food at first feast, and treats any scrap of affection as something that can be revoked without warning. He has been trained to disappear. This Harry does not learn to make himself small to survive. He learns in Dumbledore's private quarters and the staff wing that adults come back when they leave, that meals appear whether or not you've been good, that McGonagall will still correct your wand grip even if you knocked over 3 inkpots that morning. This changes everything about his interior weather. Without the Dursleys' cruelty, that reflexive self-effacement softens into grounded humility. He isn't convinced he's worthless. He's convinced he has a lot to learn. When you grow up with portraits arguing over transfiguration theory above your cot, with Hagrid sneaking you rock cakes and Pomfrey fussing over every bruise, you don't crave any love you can get. You learn to distinguish between healthy concern and manipulative attention. His hunger for belonging is still there. How could it not be when his parents are legends and ghosts? But it settles into a quieter, steadier loyalty. He doesn't cling, he commits. Psychologically, that means his bravery is not the bravery of someone with nothing to lose. Canon Harry throws himself at danger because on some level he has been told over and over that his life is worth less than Dudley's new toy. In this timeline, Harry grows up hearing a different script. You are loved, you are important, you are not expendable. This isn't a story about a boy trying to prove he deserves to exist. It's a story about a boy who has been taught from infancy that his existence carries obligations. I am loved, therefore I must live up to that love. So when he breaks rules, it looks different. He doesn't sneak past Filch because rules are unfair punishments, echoing Privet Drive. He challenges rules because he has been mentored by Dumbledore, by McGonagall, by the very walls of Hogwarts, to ask, who does this protect? Who does this harm? He has watched staff meetings from a corner armchair, heard Dumbledore questioned by his own colleagues, absorbed the idea that even the greatest wizard of the age can be wrong. But because he trusts that love is not withdrawn when he disagrees, he can question authority, including Dumbledore's, without terror. And that reframed engine of heroism, survival to stewardship, will ripple through every major crisis. A boy raised in a tower of portraits and secrets will make very different choices about the stone, about the chamber, about Sirius, about the Horcrux hunt. The castle has been his nursery and his classroom long before it becomes his battlefield. The question isn't whether he'll be brave. It's what and whom that bravery will be for, and how far he's willing to go when protecting his family means pushing back against the man who raised him. A map of a different life. How we'll walk this timeline. So how do we actually walk this new timeline without getting lost in all the what-ifs? We're not just waving our hands and saying, Harry grows up with Dumbledore. Everything is nicer. This isn't a story about smoothing the edges. It's a story about tracing every sharp corner and seeing how it cuts in a different direction. First, We'll live in those early Hogwarts years, the pre-letter years when the castle is nursery, playground, and classroom. What does it mean to toddle through the Great Hall under enchanted ceiling snow, to fall asleep in a transfigured cot in the staff wing, while McGonagall corrects essays nearby? We'll watch this Harry, learn basic charms from Flitwick before most children learn joined-up handwriting, and hear bedtime stories about Grindelwald from Dumbledore's own lips, instead of whispered rumours on the Hogwarts Express. Then we move into the pre-Hogwarts magical world beyond the walls. Hogsmeade weekends are no longer a forbidden dream. They're Harry holding Dumbledore's hand in Honeydukes at age 8. We'll look at how Diagon Alley feels when you're not a bewildered orphan, but the headmaster's ward, how the ministry eyes this arrangement, and how early exposure to wizarding politics means Harry understands words like prophecy and war long before he understands algebra. From there, we'll walk each canon school year, crisis by crisis. When the stone enters the picture, we'll ask, what happens when a boy who knows half the staff by first name meets a 3-headed dog in a corridor? Does he sneak, or does he confront the adults he's grown up trusting? When the troll gets into the castle, does Harry hide, or does he end up in the middle of the staff response because he's in Dumbledore's office when the alarm goes up? When the Chamber of Secrets opens, Parseltongue isn't a shameful surprise. It's a secret Dumbledore has already seen and filed away. So we'll explore how that changes the suspicion, the fear, the way the school looks at him, and whether Dumbledore finally explains what it might mean. When Sirius escapes, Harry isn't hearing the name for the first time in a pub. He's recognizing the man from stories half told and abruptly cut off. Running underneath all of this is the spine of changed relationships. We'll keep coming back to Harry as ward instead of neglected orphan, to Dumbledore as guardian instead of distant mentor, to Snape as reluctant co-parent pulled into bedtime potion brewing and occlumency lessons at 10. This changes everything, because each crisis, the Dementors, the Triwizard Maze, Umbridge and the DA, the Horcrux hunt, the final war, plays out through those bonds first, plot second. Structurally, we'll alternate between essay-style analysis and scene-level narrative. You'll get the logical consequences laid out clearly, and then we'll drop you into the moment. The argument in Dumbledore's office, the whispered conversation in the staff corridor, the night Harry chooses whether to obey or to protect his family, his own way. And through it all, one thing doesn't move. The prophecy still stands. Voldemort still returns. The question isn't whether Harry will face him. It's what kind of person walks into that forest when the man who raised him has been both his greatest protection and his greatest blind spot. The hidden costs of a golden childhood. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment Dumbledore keeps Harry, this isn't just an old man and an orphan. It's a political act. It's a declaration. In this timeline, the chief warlock of the Wizengamot doesn't simply arrange guardianship papers and vanish into lemon drop eccentricity. He claims the boy who lived publicly. That means every speech Dumbledore gives, every vote he casts, now has a small, dark-haired shadow attached. What if every law about Muggle-born rights, every debate about Auror oversight, is quietly framed as, what future are we building for Harry Potter? Harry doesn't choose a faction. He is the faction, a living banner for the side that opposed Voldemort and still mistrusts the ministry that failed to stop him. This changes everything for how people look at him, not just with awe, but with suspicion. Because not everyone wanted Dumbledore to win the last war so decisively that he also got the symbol of victory. Among the old pure-blood families, the whispers are immediate. Some sneer that Harry has become Dumbledore's pet project, proof that the great Albus can't resist collecting talented strays and turning them into examples of his blood traitor ideology. Others are almost offended on principle. The boy who lived, raised in a school instead of in a proper wizarding home. No summers at a respectable manor, no lessons in lineage and etiquette. Just portraits and professors and house elves. To them, Hogwarts is being greedy, hoarding the trophy of the war. And children hear what their parents say. This Harry walks into his first flying lesson, already carrying decades of dinner party resentment he's never heard, but will feel in every narrowed eye and muttered, "Dumbledore's boy." The press, of course, has a field day. In canon, the Daily Prophet turns on Harry when it's convenient. Here, they never entirely turn off. Rita Skeeter doesn't have to invent the angle. It's handed to her. What if her first big profile isn't the boy who lies, but the headmaster's weapon? She can sketch a portrait of a manipulative old wizard, grooming the chosen one under his own roof, feeding him carefully curated truths between transfiguration lessons. Cornelius Fudge and Lucius Malfoy don't have to argue that Dumbledore is dangerous in the abstract. They can point to a boy and say, "There, that's his private army." Then there's money. Harry's vault at Gringotts still exists. He is both ward and independent heir, a child whose name can sign away more galleons than most professors will see in a lifetime. How does Dumbledore navigate that? Does he let Harry pay for his own books, his own robes, his own broom, blurring the line between school and home? Does he refuse to touch a canute, insisting Hogwarts provides, even as governors muttered that the boy's fortune could ease budget shortfalls? Every choice is a lesson. Every lesson has a political cost. This isn't a story about a cozy, consequence-free golden childhood. A castle is not a bubble. Even in the safest magical fortress, Harry grows up under a weight of expectation that may be gentler than Vernon's fists, but far heavier in another way. Because when you're raised in the headmaster's shadow, the question isn't whether the world will ask something of you. It's how early they start, and what happens the first time you say no. Raised in light, the quiet power of being wanted. So what happens when the first time Harry says no, the adults in the room don't punish him for it, but lean in and listen? What if the boy who lived grows up learning that disagreement isn't defiance, it's dialogue? Being Dumbledore's ward means he is read to by McGonagall in a tart Scottish burr, transfiguration journals and fairy tales sharing the same lap. It means he learns to ask questions without fear, because the man at the big desk never snaps at him for not knowing, only ever for not asking. It means he is corrected without being humiliated. When he spills ink on a century-old manuscript, he gets a firm lesson in preservation charms, not a week in the cupboard. This changes everything. Canon Harry arrives at Hogwarts braced for cruelty, flinching from raised voices, measuring his worth by how quietly he can take up space. This Harry grows up in a castle where portraits argue with him about ethics and Pomfrey fusses over every cold. Being wanted means he doesn't confuse neglect with normal. It means when someone treats him badly, his first instinct isn't, well, of course. And because he is the headmaster's boy, he sees things most children never see. Staff meetings where McGonagall and Sprout debate curriculum changes, order discussions where names of the dead are spoken aloud and remembered. He watches Dumbledore take credit when plans succeed and take responsibility when they fail. From the beginning, victories belong to communities, not lone heroes, because he can literally count the people who fought for him before he could walk. So when the mirror of Eristed appears in his life, he doesn't see himself alone and triumphant. He sees a crowded room. Hagrid with a hand on his shoulder. Minerva in the corner, pretending not to smile. A Weasley jumper someone insisted he needed for Christmas, even if he isn't technically a Weasley here. This isn't a story about a boy chasing individual glory. It's a story about a child who has been taught that the pronoun we is a kind of shield. He becomes, in a quiet, profound way, a Hogwarts child, claimed by Hagrid, who sneaks him rock cakes and stories about his parents, watched over by Pomfrey, who keeps his chart in her office long before he's officially a student, tutored by Flitwick, who turns accidental magic into proper wandless exercises. His identity is we before it is I, because every corridor holds an adult who will step in if something goes wrong. And in this timeline, the motif of collective heroism keeps circling back. When he faces the stone, it's with strategies he's heard dissected in order meetings. When he thinks about the prophecy, he doesn't imagine himself as a lone weapon. He imagines himself as the tip of a spear forged by many hands. Families, chosen or otherwise, protect their own, and Harry's courage is a shared project, not a solitary miracle. But because love has been his constant, loss will cut deeper. Every mentor is not just a general in a war. They are bedtime stories, healed knees, familiar footsteps in the corridor. When this castle-raised Harry starts to lose people, he won't just be mourning symbols of the light. He'll be mourning home. And that means when tragedy finally comes, it won't just shape his destiny. It will test everything that made him strong. Stepping through the door from essay to story. So let's take that idea of home being tested and do the one thing canon never really lets us do. Let's walk through the door. So let's step into this other timeline. Not in abstract terms, not in broad strokes about mentorship and trauma, but on a specific night, in a specific corridor, with a specific child. It's November 1981. The war has ended only hours ago. Hogwarts is mostly asleep. A stone gargoyle creaks and scrapes aside, the sound too loud in the hush of the castle. Behind it, the spiral staircase begins to move, and Albus Dumbledore steps on, his arms full. This Harry is not a legend or a headline. He is a sleeping toddler, heavier than he looks, head lolling against Dumbledore's shoulder, scar still red and angry against pale skin. Fawkes is the first to greet them. As the office door swings open, the Phoenix lifts his head, eyes bright in the dimness. He leans down from his golden perch, feathers whispering, and lets out a soft, questioning trill. Dumbledore pauses, because of course he does, and tilts Harry so the bird can see. Tiny lashes flutter. Harry makes that half-awake, half-annoyed sound every overtired child makes. And Fawkes answers with a note so gentle It almost isn't sound at all. This isn't a story about a cupboard and cold cereal. This is a story about a boy whose first memories of home are shelves of silver instruments ticking softly, the crackle of the fire under the sleeping phoenix, and the faint smell of lemon drops and parchment. Look around with him. The headmaster's office is no longer just a place for detentions and dire revelations. It's a nursery by necessity. A transfigured cradle waits near the hearth. Beyond a discreet door lie Dumbledore's private quarters. A narrow bed, overflowing bookcases, a small sitting room that will soon acquire toy brooms and lopsided drawings. Down the corridor, the staff wing breathes quietly, portraits snoring, pipes clanking in old stone. Below, the kitchens are warm and bright. House elves already whispering about bottles and porridge and how to protect the little master from drafts. It means Hogwarts itself becomes a household. The staircase that once terrified first years will learn the rhythm of toddler footsteps. Suits of armor will become sentries and playmates. The Great Hall won't just be a place Harry enters at 11. It will be the place he learns to walk, clutching at bench legs while McGonagall pretends not to hover. And she is here tonight too, tight-lipped in the doorway, tartan dressing gown wrapped around her like armor, eyes sharp with disapproval that is really fear. Albus, she says, and there is a world in that name, but because the war is over and the child is right there, her voice softens as she steps closer. Hagrid looms behind her, eyes already shining, enormous hands twisting a spotted handkerchief. Dumbledore feels all of it at once. The guilt of using a child as a pivot point in a prophecy, the iron resolve that he will not repeat the Dursley experiment, and, unexpectedly, the warm, painful rush of affection as Harry sighs and burrows in closer. This changes everything, he thinks, and for once he isn't being dramatic. Pattern interrupt. For a heartbeat, forget wars and horcruxes and prophecies. Watch the simplest thing. Harry's small hand opens, searches, and tangles itself in Dumbledore's beard. The old man huffs out a startled laugh. Fawkes sings a single bright note. We're going to stay with that hand. Year by year, corridor by corridor, we'll follow how it grows from clutching at a beard to reaching for wands, for friends, for family, for love, all under the shadow of these towers. Because once Harry Potter grows up inside the castle, protected and shaped by it, the entire war has to grow up with him. Year 0, the baby in the headmaster's quarters. So what does that hand actually close around in those first months? Not a wand, not a broom. A quill that keeps trying to write on his forehead, a lemon drop he isn't supposed to have, the fringe of a beard belonging to the most powerful wizard of the age, who is suddenly trying to remember how often babies are meant to nap. Year 0 in this timeline is not a grand strategy board. It's a cot shoved into a corner of the headmaster's quarters, next to a cabinet of whirring instruments, now muffled under meticulous silencing charms. It's Dumbledore, who has negotiated ceasefires and Wizengamot blocks, now negotiating with house elves over mashed peas. No, Winky. Perhaps less brandy in the porridge. Yes, he understands the baby stops crying when you add it. That is precisely the problem. He builds a new schedule around this tiny axis. Morning correspondence becomes a race between Harry's first nap and the first owl post. Ministry meetings are accepted or declined based on whether he can risk leaving Harry with Minerva or Poppy. Fawkes, offended at being outsung, trills counter-lullabies until Dumbledore, with the faintest of smiles, adjusts the pitch so the Phoenix's song soothes instead of startles. This isn't a story about an omniscient puppet master. It's about an old man learning how to warm a bottle with his wand without boiling it. And Minerva McGonagall, of course, is there. Officially, she is Deputy Headmistress. Unofficially, she becomes the stern aunt who only meant to stop by for just a moment and realizes it is midnight and she has transfigured an entire chess set into soft, bouncing creatures that dance across Harry's blanket. She insists on proper boundaries, proper routines, proper distance. She also stands in the doorway of the quarters, one evening, eyes blazing, when a visiting bureaucrat mutters about weapons raised on sight. The conversation ends with the bureaucrat retreating and Minerva's hand resting very gently on the side of Harry's cot. This Harry will never doubt that someone will bare their teeth on his behalf. Hagrid barrels in as the over-enthusiastic uncle, his love as enormous as his boots. He brings a cradle made from a hollowed-out pumpkin, insists it's traditional, and proudly unveils a harmless little prototype of a blast-ended scroot. Poppy Pomfrey freezes. Dumbledore clears his throat. The creature is swiftly redirected to a reinforced crate in Hagrid's hut, and Hagrid leaves with strict instructions and a baby blanket that still smells faintly of smoke. But because the love is real, they never truly shut him out. They just teach him again and again what it means to protect. The castle itself joins the experiment. The founders' portraits argue heatedly over child-rearing philosophies, Helga advocating cuddles and warm milk, Salazar insisting on early occlumency drills, Rowena sketching educational charts, Godric suggesting toy swords. Nearly headless Nick makes absurd faces to head off tears in the corridor. The fat lady refuses to open without first demanding a lullaby, and soon there is a quiet, rotating chorus of professors singing off-key outside Gryffindor Tower at odd hours. Late at night, when the castle finally stills, Dumbledore sits beside the cot and watches Harry sleep, fingers curled in the edge of a knitted blanket that is not quite neat enough to be Minerva's and not quite uneven enough to be Hagrid's. In that dim light, the boy who lived is just a baby with milk on his chin and a faint scar under his fringe. Dumbledore leans close, the weight of prophecy and past mistakes pressing on his spine, and murmurs an apology to Lily and James that no one else will ever hear. Because taking Harry into the heart of Hogwarts isn't only strategy, it's duty, it's penance. And it means that when war comes back to these halls, it will be walking through a nursery he chose to build. A toddler among tomes, Harry's first magic lessons. Hogwarts does not know what to do with a baby at first. Libraries are built for echoes and essays, not for the slap-slap of tiny feet against stone, not for a toddler's giggle ricocheting between shelves of restricted tomes. But there he is, Harry, in little dragon-emblazoned slippers, toddling through the library stacks under Madame Pince's hawk-like supervision. She trails him with a quill behind one ear and a permanent frown, yet her hands hover just in case he wobbles. He learns to recognize the looping G of Gryffindor on a spine before he can fully write his own name. The alphabet comes not from Muggle primers, but from titles like Advanced Transfiguration and Great Wizarding Events of the 20th century. This Harry traces letters on dusty covers, while Pince mutters about greasy fingerprints and secretly adjusts the lamps so the light falls more gently on his face. This isn't a story about a boy discovering magic at 11. It's a story about a boy for whom magic is the wallpaper of his childhood. When his accidental magic flares, Dumbledore doesn't hush it or punish it. He invites Professor Flitwick to tea. Floating blocks become their first curriculum. Can Harry keep 3 blocks in the air? Can he stack them mid-air into a wobbling tower if he breathes slowly and thinks of the color red? Color-changing bubbles drift through Dumbledore's office, shifting from blue to gold when Harry concentrates, dimming when his mind wanders. They are games, yes, but they are also lesson plans. Because when you're being raised by the greatest wizard of the age, focus becomes play. Wandless intent is just what you practice before bedtime. Gentle levitation games teach him that magic responds to calm, not tantrums. That it is an extension of his body, the way balance and breath are. This changes everything about how he will later hold a wand, how he will later walk into danger. He does not feel separate from his power. And the castle itself? Portraits that talk, staircases that move, ghosts drifting through breakfast. These are not wonders to him. They are background noise. The bloody baron is the grumpy man who doesn't like jam splattered on the table. The moving staircases are being fussy again. His threshold for fear and surprise is quietly radically different from Canon Harry's. When you grow up with a poltergeist throwing ink pots down the corridor, a troll in a bathroom is alarming, yes, but not unimaginable. Still, Dumbledore draws lines. No combat spells, no curses, even the mild ones, until Harry is much older. He will teach him to mend a quill, not to disarm an enemy. He will explain why some doors stay locked, why some books remain wrapped in chains. The prophecy sits at the back of his mind like a constant headache, but he is determined that preparation must not devour childhood. Harry will know he is loved before he knows he is hunted. And yet, one afternoon at 4 or 5, Harry stops in front of a locked door on the 3rd floor corridor. The air feels thicker there. He presses his palm to the wood, frowning, sensing mystery and danger he cannot name. The castle hums around him, secrets coiled just out of reach. What if the boy who grew up among those secrets decides one day to open every door? We'll have to see which door opens first. Snape's new problem, the ward of his worst enemy. The first time Severus Snape nearly walks into him, Harry is 3 years old and carrying a stuffed phoenix that trails a faint, ridiculous glow. The corridor outside Dumbledore's office is quiet, late, one of those blue-shadowed evenings when Hogwarts feels more sentient than stone. Snape sweeps around the corner, robes billowing, already rehearsing the cutting remark he'll deliver about overdue wolfsbane ingredients. And then he stops, because there, in the center of the flagstones, is Lily's child. James's messy hair, Lily's green eyes, clutching a toy modelled on Dumbledore's familiar, as if it's a lifeline. Canon Snape promised to protect the boy in the abstract, a name in a prophecy. This Snape has to step around him on the stairs. This changes everything. Not because Snape suddenly becomes a doting uncle, but because daily proximity turns an old wound into a living, breathing presence. He hears Harry laughing in Dumbledore's office when he brings reports. He sees the headmaster conjure sugared plums for small, sticky hands. He watches Albus kneel at eye level to explain why certain doors are locked and certain names, Voldemort, prophecy, are not bedtime stories yet. Where was that patience when Severus was young and desperate and half-starved for approval? Where was that warmth when he came to Dumbledore with guilt and dark marks and a plea to save Lily? The comparison is unfair, and he knows it. He resents it anyway. This isn't a story about Snape secretly softening overnight. It's about how hatred curdles when it has to share a hallway with obligation. He agreed to protect the child for Lily's sake. He did not agree to watch James Potter's face light up every time Albus Dumbledore walks into a room. Dumbledore, of course, notices. One evening, after Harry has been levitated gently to bed in the adjoining chamber, the headmaster turns to Snape, voice mild, eyes unyielding. "He will be your student one day, Severus. It would be advantageous if he did not fear you before he can spell your name." "Fear," Snape replies, "is an excellent deterrent against mischief, perhaps." Dumbledore says, "Not against destiny." Consider this an opportunity, not to love him if you cannot, but to be better than the man you were when Lily died. Redemption as homework. Assigned, not requested. Snape bristles at the implication that Harry's presence is some kind of moral exercise. But because Lily's memory is the only altar he still prays at, he does not refuse. So a pattern emerges. Harry is taught early that Professor Snape is off-limits territory, a storm cloud in the dungeons you do not poke. The other professors are stories and biscuits and gentle corrections. Snape is the name Dumbledore says with that particular warning tone. And yet, Hogwarts is echoey and doors are thin. On nights when he should be asleep, Harry hears low, tense voices through the office wall. Words like prophecy, Horcrux, protection failing. Snape's sarcasm, sharp as broken glass. Dumbledore's calm, tired replies. The boy doesn't understand the content, but he learns the cadence of war before he learns long division. Pattern interrupt. Imagine being raised in a school where your bedtime soundtrack is the strategy meeting for a future war you don't know you're leading. Years later, it crystallizes in a single moment. Harry, 8 now, wanders too far from the Great Hall and turns a corner. Snape is there, mid-stride. For a heartbeat, they're alone. Green eyes meet black. Recognition slams into Severus. Lily's gaze, James's posture, Dumbledore's ward. And he actually flinches, as if struck by a silent curse. Harry doesn't know why. He only knows that this man looks at him as though he's both accusation and answer. And that means their story in this timeline is going to be more intimate, more painful, and potentially far more transformative than canon ever allowed. Growing up in a castle, friends, loneliness, and the lack of normal. Snape flinches, and somewhere high above them, a clock in the tower chimes the hour. Time is moving, even if Harry's childhood is about to get strangely stuck. Because what does growing up look like when your nursery is a castle? When your bedtime lullaby is the hum of the Great Hall, rather than the drone of a television? This isn't a story about a boy in a cupboard. This is a story about a boy who learns the echo of his own footsteps on stone long before he learns what a pavement is. During term, Harry's days are crowded. He eats at the staff table, then is promptly stolen by the student body. A 7th-year Ravenclaw claims him in the library, reading aloud from Transfiguration journals while he curls up with a chocolate frog card. A gaggle of Hufflepuffs insists he attend their study groups, solemnly assigning him very important jobs like shuffling flashcards or timing practice essays with a battered hourglass. To them, he's mascot, little brother, occasionally a living good luck charm before Quidditch matches. And he soaks it in. This Harry measures himself against 17-year-olds before he's 7. He learns that essays are things you stress over, that OLLs are looming monsters, that prefect rounds are a sacred duty. Responsibility, in his mind, is walking quietly in corridors so you don't disturb revising any WT students, not sharing toys in a sandbox. When McGonagall tells him to be patient, he has no model for what children your age are even supposed to be doing. Then June comes, and everything empties. One day the corridors are a river of robes and chatter. The next, silence. No 7th year to read him articles. No Hufflepuff study hive. Just portraits, ghosts, and the distant clink of plates in the kitchens. Holidays mean long, echoing mornings where he does sums at a little desk in Dumbledore's office. Afternoons chasing Fawkes's tail feathers, evenings listening to Hagrid's booming stories by the fire. He isn't bullied. He isn't unwanted. But because there are no Dudleys, no neighborhood children, no Muggle school, there is also no ordinary. His only glimpses of normal childhood come from Muggle studies texts and the occasional teleprogram Dumbledore has painstakingly charmed to play in a side room. Birthday parties at bowling alleys, school runs, packed playgrounds, all theoretical, all distant. So Dumbledore tries to compensate. On Hogsmeade weekends, he quietly orchestrates playdates. A young Tonks turns up with bubblegum pink hair and an inexhaustible supply of games that end in minor explosions. A pair of Weasley boys are invited for a tour, which somehow becomes 3 hours of racing toy brooms down the Charms corridor. These visits plant seeds, faces Harry will recognize later on the Hogwarts Express, names that will already feel like family when the war comes. Still, they are events, not a rhythm. They are special days, not a childhood. One June, Harry stands at an upper window and presses his face to the cool glass as the Hogwarts Express pulls away. Steam billows, voices fade, hands wave from windows he's never sat behind. For everyone else, the castle is a place they visit, a chapter in their growing up. For him, it is the whole book. And as the train shrinks to a red dot, he realizes, with a small, sharp ache, that this changes everything about who he is allowed to become. So, let's explore what happens when home is a legend and you're the only child it never lets go of. The prophecy in the nursery, what Dumbledore tells Harry and when. Home is a legend, yes, but legends need an author. And in this timeline, the man holding the quill is Albus Dumbledore, alone in a tower with a child who will one day be asked to die. So what do you tell that child at bedtime? Canon Dumbledore chooses secrecy, distance, the illusion of an ordinary childhood that was never actually ordinary. This Harry grows up under the same roof as the man who heard the prophecy, who watched it shatter on a ministry floor. If Dumbledore is the one who tucks him in and bandages scraped knees, he cannot pretend Harry's life is just school and sweets and Quidditch posters. He knows that hiding everything until 15 means betrayal. But because he is now father as well as general, he also knows that dumping the whole truth on a 6-year-old is its own kind of cruelty. So he does something he is famously bad at in canon. He chooses a middle path. The first versions come as fairy tales. A dark wizard who feared death so much he tore his soul. A baby saved by a mother's love so fierce it burned. A mark left behind, not as a curse, but as a reminder. Dumbledore never says Voldemort, never says prophecy, never says you. He talks about choices instead of destinies, about how real magic is deciding who you will protect when it would be easier to run. To a 4-year-old tracing the phoenix on his quilt, it is just a story. To Dumbledore, it is curriculum. By 8 or 9, the edges sharpen. Harry knows there was a prophecy, even if he has not heard the words. He knows a dark wizard came for his family because of it, that his parents died resisting, that the lightning bolt on his forehead is not an accident, but a hinge in the world's history. He knows Dumbledore was there when the prophecy was spoken, that something about Harry himself made Voldemort afraid. He does not yet know about neither can live while the other survives, but he has absorbed the idea that there is an unfinished story, and that he is standing in the blank space where the last chapter should be. This changes everything about his morality. Canon Harry is blindsided, angry, suddenly recast as a weapon at 15. This Harry has grown up with a low, constant hum of purpose under his days. Transfiguration essays, flying lessons, tea with McGonagall, and beneath all of it, the awareness that someday he will be asked for something enormous. That can warp. It can become entitlement, a quiet belief that rules bend for him, because fate already did. Or it can become a fierce, almost Weasley-ish sense of responsibility. If his life was saved for a reason, he will make sure no one else's is wasted cheaply. And here is the question Dumbledore cannot answer with a fairy tale. If you tell a child from the beginning that his life has a purpose, how does he ever learn he is allowed to exist for himself, not just for a war, where, in a nursery lined with prophecies and phoenixes, is there room for ordinary wants, friends, crushes, the right to be afraid? Or does that lesson arrive too late, the moment Harry realizes the story Dumbledore has been telling isn't finished, and the missing line is the price of his own life? Letters, not cupboards. Harry meets the Muggle world on his terms. The answer, at least at first, is paper. Not prophecies, not secret contracts. Letters, cream parchment addressed in a precise, looping hand to Mrs. Petunia Dursley, née Evans, Privet Drive. What if, in this timeline, Dumbledore doesn't simply walk away from Lily's sister? What if he tests the boundary instead of assuming it cannot be crossed? He writes after the funeral, and again on Harry's first birthday. He explains, without pleading, that Lily's boy is safe at Hogwarts, that he is loved, that Petunia may, if she wishes, receive photographs, or even visit under supervision. The replies, when they come at all, are brief and vicious. Freak, dangerous. Keep him away from Dudley. By the 3rd year, the envelopes return unopened, purple refused stamps, screaming where Petunia herself will not. This isn't a story about reconciliation. It's a story about a man who refuses to let silence be the only bridge between worlds. Because Dumbledore doesn't cut the Muggle world off, he curates Harry's entry into it. No cupboard, no barred windows, no desperate child pressing his face to glass at the zoo, making a snake vanish because pain has to go somewhere. Instead, there is a small Scottish village, a broom ride away from Hogwarts, where Harry, hand in Dumbledore's, learns the word bus with the same delighted solemnity he once gave to Hippogriff. He watches coins clink into a fare box. He learns that telephones ring instead of fluing, that electricity hums where magic would buzz. To him, these are curiosities, not the stolen birthright of a boy locked under the stairs. This changes everything. He does not grow up believing Muggles are cruel because they are Muggles. He grows up believing they are complicated because people are. And always there are questions. What games did Mum play before she knew about charms? Did Aunt Petunia ever push her on a swing? Why did she hate magic so much, if it saved people? This Harry asks about Lily's childhood, the way other children ask for bedtime stories. Dumbledore answers with care. He speaks of a clever girl who loved books and autumn, and who once tried to plug her wand into a wall socket. He mentions a sister who felt left behind, who made the wrong bargains with her own bitterness. Pattern interrupt. Dumbledore never says, "Your aunt is a monster." He says, "Your aunt is a frightened woman who chose unkindness, and you must choose differently." So there is no voice hissing. There's no such thing as magic. Instead, there is the steady refrain that Harry belongs to both worlds, even if he has only ever lived in one. He steps through the Muggle side of Diagon Alley, watches tourists stare at shop fronts they cannot breach, and wonders what it would be to be on the other side of not knowing. We end this slice of his childhood on a quiet ache. One summer evening, Dumbledore brings him to the edge of a park. Harry stands behind a low stone wall, invisible under a disillusionment charm, and watches a group of Muggle children play football. They shout, "Trip!" argue over goals. No one stares at his scar. No one whispers, "Boy who lived." He could never join them. The wards, the war, the weight of prophecy all say no. But because he has been taught that this world is also his, he feels the loss. He presses his palm to the rough stone, tracking the ball's arc, and wonders, not for the first time, what it would feel like to be anonymous enough to run onto the pitch, miss the ball entirely, and have that be the most important thing about him. And that unanswered question will follow him back through the castle gates, right into the next choice Dumbledore makes about how much of Harry's life belongs to destiny, and how much he's allowed to live for himself. The letter that doesn't need an owl, Harry's Hogwarts acceptance. So what does it mean, in this timeline, when the boy who has grown up beneath the enchanted ceiling finally becomes a first year himself? What does a Hogwarts letter even look like when Hogwarts has always been home? Harry finds out on a Tuesday. The irony hits us first. This Harry has eaten porridge at the staff table, played tag with suits of armor, and watched 6 sorting ceremonies from the shadowed gallery above the Great Hall, counting the cheers for each house. He knows the exact moment the hat will shout, the way the candles dip when the applause crests. And yet, On the morning of his 11th birthday, a barn owl still swoops through Dumbledore's open window, drops a thick envelope on his plate, and hoots expectantly, as if this is Privet Drive and not the headmaster's office. Green ink, thick parchment, the Hogwarts crest in wax, unbroken. Dumbledore could have handed it to him over tea the night before. He could have murmured, "You know you'll be a student next year, my boy," and left it at that. But because this isn't a story about convenience, he makes it a ceremony. He banishes the half-peeled lemon drops, straightens his ridiculous hat, and calls Minerva up from breakfast so there will be a deputy headmistress present, proper and formal. He insists Harry stand while he reads his own name aloud from the envelope, as if the castle itself is inviting him in for the first time. This changes everything, and also nothing. On paper, it's the same letter-cannon Harry clutched in a cupboard. In practice, it's a line in the stone floor. Until now, he has been Dumbledore's ward, the castle's child, the boy who slips into Charm's lessons to watch from the back. Now he is being told, "You belong here," in a different way. You will be sorted. You will have a house. You will not just haunt the edges of other people's stories. He is thrilled. Of course he is. To have a timetable with his name on it, to buy books in Diagon Alley that are his homework, and not just Dumbledore's. Light reading, to wear school robes that match the other children rather than hand-me-down staff cardigans. But excitement is only half of it. The other half is a knot in his stomach. How will they see him, these students who have pointed him out in the corridors for years? Will he be a classmate or a curiosity? Is he joining them or being observed among them? And then there's the question everyone else treats as a game, and he treats as something closer to fate. Which house will claim him? The staff start a gentle, ridiculous campaign. Flitwick sends him a charmed paper crane that sings the Ravenclaw anthem off-key. Pomona leaves a pot of pufferpods on his bedside table with a note. Hufflepuff values gardeners. Even Severus, with a thin, unreadable smirk, remarks that Slytherin has produced many excellent strategists. Older students slip him parchment notes via friendly ghosts. Gryffindors brag about Quidditch. Ravenclaws promise secret study nooks. Hufflepuffs boast of midnight feasts. For once, Harry realizes this part of his life is not predetermined by prophecy, or by Dumbledore, or by the scar on his forehead. The hat will look in his head, and he will get to want something. That night, he lies awake in his small bed off Dumbledore's quarters, the letter propped against the lamplight. The castle hums around him, old and familiar. He stares at the green ink until it blurs and wonders if, when the hat settles over his eyes, it will see Dumbledore's boy, or just Harry, and what it will mean for everyone if he chooses one over the other. So, let's explore what happens when that choice finally arrives, and the sorting hat has to decide what to do with a child who already belongs to Hogwarts. Platform 9 3/4 without the Dursleys. The irony is that for a boy who has spent his whole life in Hogwarts, his first real journey to Hogwarts is only just beginning. Canon Harry steps onto platform 9 3/4 bewildered, clutching a letter and a half-remembered name. This Harry, walks beside Albus Dumbledore, who is carrying a paper bag of sherbet lemons and pretending not to be sentimental about it. Dumbledore could have sighed along, apparated him to the front gates. He could have let the castle swallow him up, as it always has. But because he understands rites of passage, he insists on the train. This isn't a story about convenience, it's about equality, about the headmaster's ward arriving not as a prince returning to his domain, but as one 11-year-old among many, awkward and hopeful, and sweating under a trunk that keeps trying to slide off the trolley. Dumbledore frames it very deliberately. The Express is where you meet your yearmates as equals, where you are not Professor Dumbledore's boy, or the boy who lived, but just Harry with a packed lunch and a nervous stomach. We can imagine the scene on the Muggle side of King's Cross. No Dursleys huffing and mocking, no Vernon abandoning him between platforms. Instead, there's McGonagall in tartan, lips thin but eyes soft, checking her watch with that air of brisk affection. There's Dumbledore, explaining the barrier one last time, his hand briefly on Harry's shoulder. And then, crucially, he lets go. He and McGonagall hang back, giving Harry a long corridor of space between their world and the Scarlet Engine. So who guides him through the wall? Very possibly, it's still Molly Weasley. Only now, when she spots a dark-haired boy hovering uncertainly near the barrier with an owl and a trunk, she doesn't just see a stranger. She sees the child she's watched grow up from a respectful distance, the boy Dumbledore brings to the Burrow for summer dinners, the one Ginny has already written about in her diary. Harry, dear, she might say, voice warm with both awe and familiarity. Arthur mentioned you'd be on the train. Come along, it's best not to dawdle. On the train itself, the dynamic shifts again. What if you've grown up watching prefect meetings and staff duels, hearing portraits argue about transfiguration theory? You don't gape at chocolate frog cards. You already know who Nicholas Flamel is. This changes everything about how Harry presents himself. He's more confident with magic, quick to help someone levitate a trunk. But there's a new self-consciousness too. Being the headmaster's ward can be intimidating. You can almost hear other kids wondering, can you get expelled if you annoy him? Does he sit with Ron, renewing an old, easy rhythm, or does he hesitate, worried that being seen with Dumbledore's boy will paint a target on Ron's back before term even starts? Does Hermione, hearing his surname and his guardian in the same sentence, arrive with a list of questions instead of shy admiration? The compartment door slides open. Voices overlap. Someone says his name. Harry takes a breath, chooses a seat, and with it, the first friends who will decide whether they're meeting a legend or just a boy. And in the corridor, unseen, a pair of blue eyes flicker toward that compartment, already weighing what that choice will mean for the entire timeline. Sorting the headmaster's ward, house, identity, and expectations. The whispers start before the boats even reach the shore. Not just, there he is, the boy who lived, but there he is, the boy who eats at the staff table. The boy Professor McGonagall walks to breakfast. The boy Hagrid carried on his shoulders when he was small. What if the legend you've grown up hearing stories about has already been haunting your corridors for years? By the time Harry stands in the doorway of the Great Hall, the question isn't only, is that his scar? It's, which house is worthy of him? You can almost hear the theories crackling through the candles. Of course he'll be Gryffindor, Dumbledore's own house. No Slytherin, because power goes to power. Maybe Ravenclaw. He's always in the library. Someone in yellow mutters, "Maybe Hufflepuff deserves a hero for once." This changes everything. Canon Harry arrived at Hogwarts desperate for belonging, clinging to the first real friendship he'd ever had. This Harry, walks between the tables with a straighter back, already knowing the castle's secrets, already knowing half the teachers by their first names. He is not wondering whether he belongs. He is wondering where he can do the most good and the most damage. The hat drops over his eyes, and we stay there in the dark with a mind that has been trained. Legilimency lessons in Dumbledore's office, quiet talks with McGonagall about anger and justice, evenings listening to portraits describe Grindelwald and war. The hat tastes courage, yes, but also a cold, disciplined edge. Ambition, sharpened by prophecy. A scholar's curiosity honed by free run of the restricted section. A bone-deep loyalty to the adults who raised him, and the school that is literally his home. Gryffindor, it muses, would be easy, expected. He already throws himself between danger and the people he loves. But because he knows his own darkness, Slytherin calls to him more consciously than in canon. He can see, very clearly, how that house could become a crucible rather than a corruption. Then there is Ravenclaw, reflecting back at him hours spent curled in a staff room chair, while Flitwick explains theory, and Dumbledore nudges him toward questions instead of answers. Pattern interrupt. The hat actually asks him, not, "Where do you want to go?" but "Who do you want to be seen as? Guardian's ward or boy among equals?" In this timeline, we lean into resonance. Gryffindor, the hat decides at last, not because it cannot place him elsewhere, but because Harry chooses visibility over safety. He knows the story he's stepping into and walks toward it. The hall explodes. The Gryffindor table surges to its feet. Half triumphant, half relieved the legend has landed where legends are supposed to. The Slytherins' faces close, an opportunity lost, a narrative confirmed. At the staff table, McGonagall's shoulders drop a fraction, tension she'd never admit to easing. She had feared a green and silver future for Lily's son. Snape's mouth tightens, not in surprise at the house, but at the applause. To him, it's confirmation that James Potter's shadow has been officially installed as the school's golden boy. Harry sits among his new housemates and, for the first time, feels distance. From here, Dumbledore is not the man who tucked him into a transfigured camp bed in the staff wing, but the headmaster, remote, robed, framed by the teachers who helped raise him. Their eyes meet across the candles and banners, and the line draws itself, clean and irrevocable. This isn't a story about a boy who never had a home. It's a story about what happens when your home becomes your institution, and the man who is your family becomes your judge. And as the feast begins, Harry realizes that growing up in Hogwarts has prepared him for war, but it has also made every future choice public. So, let's explore what that means the first time he breaks a rule, and the first time he breaks Dumbledore's trust. First year, new rules. A Harry who knows the castle. The first week proves it. Harry doesn't arrive at Hogwarts blinking at floating candles and moving staircases. He walks into the castle the way other children walk into their grandparents' houses. He knows which flagstones stick, which portrait snores through roll call, which suit of armor hums when it's about to move. This changes everything. Canon Harry spent that first year overwhelmed, using all his energy just surviving the sensory shock of magic and the social shock of fame. This Harry has already spilled ink in McGonagall's office at 6, flown a school broom under Madam Hooch's watchful eye at 8, and listened to Dumbledore turn the Goblin rebellions into bedtime stories. He isn't trying to remember which end of his wand to hold. He's trying to remember which version of basic charms theory Professor Flitwick prefers. In class, that head start is obvious. When Flitwick explains the wand movement for Wingardium Leviosa, Harry's hand twitches with the muscle memory of practicing with dull, child-safe wands in an empty classroom. When Madam Hooch lectures on broom etiquette, he's heard it all before, only this time he's not perched on a school-issue clean sweep under Dumbledore's very tense supervision. History of magic isn't a dull drone. It's a cross-reference exercise, matching Binns's dates against the more human, more biased versions he's heard from portraits and from Professor McGonagall over cocoa. So he isn't drowning, which means he has bandwidth for something else: people and politics. While Ron worries about homework and Hermione worries about being good enough, Harry is watching which Slytherins flinch when Snape raises his voice, which Hufflepuffs already know each other's families, which teachers defer to Dumbledore in public, and which do not. What if your first year at school is also your first real test as a political heir? That's the quiet tension running under every feast and every staff meeting he's not supposed to overhear. But because he's ahead, there's backlash. Some Gryffindors mutter that, of course, the Headmaster's ward gets Transfiguration right the first time. A few Slytherins sneer that he's been spoon-fed answers in the tower. Others, especially younger Hufflepuffs and wide-eyed Ravenclaws, whisper when he passes, as if he's both legend and teacher's pet. This isn't a story about easy belonging. It's about how being Dumbledore's boy can make every friendship feel like a test. Is Ron laughing with him because he's Harry, or because he's the Headmaster's favorite? Is Hermione asking questions, or auditioning for proximity to power? All of that changes the early adventures. The midnight duel with Malfoy. Harry already knows 3 different routes from Gryffindor Tower to the trophy room, and which staircases are more likely to shift after 11. When Neville loses his toad, Harry doesn't just tag along. He quietly steers them away from Filch's usual patrol, because he's watched those patterns for years from behind Dumbledore's office window. The troll on Halloween. A Harry who knows the castle feels a sharper sense of ownership. The moment Quirrell gasps about a troll in the dungeons, Harry isn't just frightened. He's furious that something threatening has entered his home. He knows which corridor near the girls' bathroom is a dead end, which side passage leads to an unused classroom where a terrified first year might hide. When he and Ron run after Hermione, it's not blind courage, it's calculated risk, using secret passages he learned from portraits and from a very talkative suit of armor. Even Fluffy is different. Harry doesn't stumble on the 3-headed dog purely by accident. He notices that a door he knows as a disused music room has suddenly acquired heavy locks and a new enchantment signature. Curiosity is informed, not naive. He recognizes Dumbledore's magic. He recognizes that someone, somewhere, has decided his school is now a battlefield. And over all of this hovers Dumbledore's impossible balancing act. Publicly, he has to treat Harry as one student among hundreds. That means taking points when Harry is caught out of bed, assigning detentions when he's found near forbidden corridors, letting McGonagall scold him without stepping in as the indulgent guardian. Privately, every incident lands like a personal failure. How do you punish a boy for wandering corridors you taught him to love? How do you not protect the child you raised when Filch slams a detention slip on your desk? The first real break comes late one night, after the troll, after Fluffy, when the stone is still only a suspicion and the school has half forgotten its fear. Harry is in the common room, homework finished, fire low. He knows, because Dumbledore has told him that some doors are not for him. He knows that the third-floor corridor is forbidden, that there are layers of adult plans he is meant to trust without understanding. And then he hears it. Hushed Slytherin voices in a side passage, Snape's name, the word stone, spoken with the kind of greedy awe he's only ever heard in ministry gossip. He could go to McGonagall. He could go to Dumbledore. That is the rule-following path, the path his guardian has begged him to take. He hesitates, not because he doesn't understand the rules, but because he understands them too well. If he tells Dumbledore, the headmaster will move, the staff will close ranks, and Harry will be ushered firmly back into safety, back into childhood, back into the role of protected heir. What if he doesn't want that? What if growing up in Hogwarts has given him not only knowledge, but responsibility? A sense that this castle is his to defend. In that moment, he chooses. He looks at Ron, at Hermione, at the staircase that leads toward the third floor. "We're going," he says quietly. "If Snape's after the stone, we have to know why." It's not ignorance, it's conviction. And as Harry steps onto the forbidden staircase, he's not just breaking curfew, he's breaking Dumbledore's design for how this war is supposed to unfold. Because no matter how carefully you raise a child, no matter how many wards and rules you weave around him, you cannot script his courage. And that choice, to act on what he knows rather than wait for permission, will echo through every year that follows, up to the night when Harry has to decide whether to follow Dumbledore's final plan or write his own ending to the war. So, let's explore how that tension between training and autonomy reshapes the later crises. The chamber, Sirius, and the moment Harry realizes that loving Dumbledore doesn't mean obeying him. The stone and the ward. When Guardian and Chosen One collide, if Harry is already Dumbledore's ward, do we still get a Philosopher's Stone hidden at Hogwarts at all? Or does the headmaster look at this boy he's been raising in the shadow of prophecy and decide that one world-ending secret under his roof is quite enough? This changes everything on the surface, but not at the core. Dumbledore still has a war to prevent, a Dark Lord to keep disembodied, and a cursed object Nicholas Flamel can no longer safely protect at home. Hogwarts remains the best fortified place in Britain. The difference is that now the castle doesn't just house the stone, it houses the one child Voldemort is fated to fear. So Dumbledore brings the stone, but he builds his protections with Harry in mind, weaving wards that respond to Harry's magical signature, posting staff he trusts on every layer, calibrating the danger to repel intruders, not test his ward. And yet, because Harry has grown up in those corridors, he feels the change immediately. This Harry knows what it looks like when the staff are relaxed over pumpkin juice, and what it looks like when McGonagall's mouth thins at the mention of the third-floor corridor. He notices Hagrid's new dragon-sized keyring, the way Flitwick's charm work hums more intensely near a certain staircase, the way Dumbledore's eyes avoid his when Quirrell stammers about trolls and break-ins. Canon Harry stumbles into the mystery because he's lonely, curious, and underestimated. Dumbledore's ward walks into it because he can tell the adults are lying. He's been raised in a world where secrets mean danger. So when Dumbledore says gently that there are matters being handled, Harry hears the omission as loudly as any shout. In this timeline, we don't get pure obfuscation. We get a more honest conversation that is, in its own way, more dangerous. Dumbledore sits Harry down, maybe in that office Harry has napped in since he was 5, and admits that something old, powerful, and desperately sought is being guarded in the school. He doesn't say stone, he doesn't say Voldemort, but he does say, explicitly, that Harry must not interfere. Not because Harry is useless, but because Harry is loved. This isn't a story about a boy who blunders into heroism. It's about a boy who has been trained, then asked to stand down, which means when he chooses to act, it's conscious defiance, not naive bravery. That choice reframes the trio as well. Ron, or another close friend, now has to navigate being best mates with the one student who could, in theory, walk straight into the headmaster's office and demand answers. Hermione, already inclined to trust authority, asks the obvious question, "Why don't you? What does it mean that Harry keeps turning to them instead of to the man who raised him?" Every time Harry says, "We'll handle this," he is not just rejecting school rules. He is choosing peers over guardian, childhood solidarity over paternal protection. So when they finally reach the Mirror of Erised, the emotional stakes are sharper. Canon Harry sees his parents and aches for family. This Harry sees James and Lily, yes, but also a second vision layered behind them, an older version of himself, walking beside Dumbledore into battle as equals. Wands drawn, the castle burning in silhouette behind them. It is the future Dumbledore is trying to delay, and the destiny Harry feels pulling at him already. Does he step toward the life where he is a child under protection, or the one where he is a general at Dumbledore's side? As his reflection lifts its wand in silent challenge, Harry has to decide, and that decision will cast a long shadow over the chamber waiting beneath the school. Love, not scar tissue. How first year changes Harry inside. Harry wakes in the hospital wing again. White sheets, sugar quills, the smell of potions and polish. Canon gives us a lonely boy and a distant headmaster talking around the truth. But in this timeline, the man sitting beside his bed is not just Albus Dumbledore, headmaster. He is Albus, the person who tucked him in when nightmares came at 6, who taught him to hold a wand at 8. This changes everything. In canon, that conversation is a revelation and a betrayal wrapped together. Harry learns about his mother's sacrifice, about Voldemort's survival, and we watch him realize how much has been kept from him. Here, the omissions land differently. When Dumbledore dodges the full prophecy, when he softens the details of Quirrell's death, he isn't an enigmatic authority figure withholding information from a student. He is a guardian trying to protect his child's right to be 11 for a little longer. We, as readers, can still argue with that choice. But because their relationship has been built over a decade, Harry hears, beneath the evasions, a familiar promise, I will tell you more when I think you're ready. I am not leaving you alone with this." And Harry's own reaction? This Harry does not feel ambushed by the existence of Voldemort or by the weight of his parents' legacy. He grew up hearing careful, age-appropriate stories about James's recklessness and Lily's brilliance, about a war that was not a fairy tale, but a warning. So when he learns exactly how close Voldemort came, he doesn't think, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" He thinks, "So this is what I've been training for." That sounds triumphant. It's also frightening, because it means he immediately places himself inside the story, not outside it. Surviving the stone reshapes his self-image along that fault line. Canon Harry walks away feeling, on some level, that he got lucky again. That love he never knew he had saved him twice. Our Harry walks away thinking, "Dumbledore trusted me with this." That can be deeply empowering. A child who has been consistently loved and believed in is less likely to minimize his own courage. But it can also dangerously validate every instinct to run toward the fire. If your guardian, the greatest wizard of the age, sends you into real danger and you succeed, what does that teach you about your role in the coming war? There is a quiet corrective built into the night, though Harry did not reach the stone alone. Even with his extra training, even with his head start on magical theory and dueling drills in an empty classroom, he needed Ron's chessboard sacrifice and Hermione's logic. The protections fall to a trio, not a prodigy. This isn't a story about solitary brilliance. It's about collective heroism, about a boy raised in a web of relationships, learning that family and friendship are not weaknesses to be outgrown, but the very mechanism by which the world is saved. And then the train leaves. Trunks rattle, owls hoot, the great hall empties. In canon, Harry goes back to Privet Drive, his victories packed away with his wand. Here, he remains at Hogwarts for the summer, walking echoing corridors that have never been entirely quiet for him before. One evening, he and Dumbledore sit at the staff table. 2 plates, no noise, the enchanted ceiling holding a soft June dusk. No grand speeches, just the clink of cutlery, a shared pot of tea, and the awareness hanging between them that what happened beneath the school was not an end, but a prologue. Dumbledore watches a boy who is his ward, his student, and perhaps his future general. Harry watches a man who is his guardian, his headmaster, and perhaps his commander. Both understand, even if they don't say it yet, that the war they have been circling for a decade has finally shifted from memory to coming reality. So, let's explore what happens when that quiet summer becomes their last truly peaceful one. Second year, same castle, darker shadows. The chamber opens. Peaceful, but not idle. When September comes again, Harry isn't arriving at Hogwarts on a scarlet steam train. He's simply moving his trunk down 3 corridors from Dumbledore's quarters to the Gryffindor common room, carrying with him a summer that felt less like holiday and more like boot camp wrapped in grandfatherly affection. Because after Quirrell, Dumbledore stopped pretending the war was hypothetical. So we open second year with a Harry who has spent weeks practicing silent, stunning spells in empty classrooms, running tactical what-ifs over breakfast, and learning the outlines, though not the names, of Horcruxes as a theory of dark anchors. This Harry has been taught to scan a room the way other 12-year-olds scan a Quidditch column. He knows that danger doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a diary. That's why, when the first attack comes, it doesn't feel to him like Hogwarts has suddenly become dangerous. It feels like something old has finally surfaced. Mrs. Norris, frozen, the message on the wall, wet and gleaming. Enemies of the air, beware. In canon, this reads as horror movie graffiti. Here, for Harry, it reads almost as a family argument carved into stone. Because Dumbledore has told him more than he tells a normal student. Late night cocoa in the office has included stories about the founders, about Slytherin's departure, about a rumored chamber that Dumbledore has never found, but has never dismissed. Harry walks those corridors knowing he lives inside a legend, and suddenly the legend is answering back. This changes everything about how he reads the mystery. He isn't just frightened, he's implicated. If there is an heir of Slytherin at Hogwarts, that heir is threatening his home, his guardian's life work, the castle that raised him. It feels less like a ghost story and more like someone attacking his family house. And then Parseltongue explodes into the open. In this timeline, it's not his first time speaking to snakes. Sprout has long since discovered that Dumbledore's ward is weirdly good at calming the more temperamental greenhouse vipers. Hagrid has watched him lean over a crate and murmur until a fanged serpent settles. Harry has mentioned it to Dumbledore in passing, and Dumbledore, very carefully, has not flinched. So when he shouts at the dueling club snake to stop, the shock for Harry isn't the language. It's the faces, the way the room recoils, the way even Gryffindors look at him as if something has cracked and something dark is peering through. This isn't a story about a boy discovering a new power. It's a story about a boy discovering that a familiar part of himself is, in other people's eyes, monstrous. And because he is Dumbledore's ward, the cognitive dissonance hits harder. How can the headmaster's boy, the one who sits at the staff table on Christmas and carries Fawkes's molted feathers in his pockets, also be speaking the language of Slytherin's monster? Whispers spread faster than any curse. Is Dumbledore hiding something, training something? Harry feels the castle tilt under his feet. The Weasleys love him. Dumbledore believes in him. But corridors fall silent when he passes, and even Ron has to work harder, louder, to insist that Harry isn't the heir, which is exactly when the board removes Dumbledore. In canon, his departure is terrifying. Here, it is almost shattering. Harry doesn't just lose a headmaster. He loses his guardian, his legal protector, the one adult who knows the full shape of the prophecy hanging over his head. The office is empty. Fawkes is gone. The quiet summer of shared plans feels abruptly unfinished. And for the first time, the boy trained in that office has to ask, what if the war comes early, and he has to stand this one without Dumbledore beside him? Into the pipes with a different courage, rescuing Ginny Weasley. He's 12 years old, standing in a bathroom that smells of damp stone and fear. And the headmaster's office is empty. No Phoenix, no quiet voice to nudge him toward the right kind of courage. What do you do when the man who taught you to wait, to plan, to trust adults, isn't there to catch the fall? This Harry doesn't stumble into the decision to go after Ginny. He weighs it. He thinks of Molly's hands shaking as she read the latest notice, of Arthur muttering about governors and inquiries, and how the staff's every move is being watched. He remembers Dumbledore's lessons said over cocoa in that office. When power is paralyzed by fear or politics, responsibility doesn't vanish, it shifts. Someone has to step into the gap. What if that someone is a boy who has been raised to see himself as a guardian, not a passenger? So he doesn't just follow Ron and Lockhart down blind corridors. He leads. Because he grew up in these walls, he knows that Myrtle's bathroom sits directly above a tangle of disused service pipes. He's heard portraits gossip about the old Slytherin works under the lake, listened to a 17th century headmistress warn him, half fond, never to whistle in the lower tunnels unless he wanted serpents. When the sink opens, he isn't surprised the way Canon Harry was. He's already running the castle's underbelly in his head, mapping where a basilisk might move without collapsing foundations. On the way down, the fear isn't just for Ginny, it's for the boy in the diary. Dumbledore has not given him the whole prophecy, but he has given him context. Tom Riddle, brilliant and broken, the orphan who turned his hurt into domination. Harry has seen that name in dusty files, heard McGonagall once go quiet at the mention of a head boy who vanished into terror. So when Riddle steps out of the pages in the chamber, Harry doesn't see a stranger. He sees the charismatic prefect Dumbledore described, the boy who might have been a different kind of legend. This isn't a story about faceless evil. It's about what happens when that same charm fixes on Ginny, shy and blazing, and uses her need for a friend as a weapon. His duel with the basilisk is less reckless improvisation and more desperate application of half-remembered lore. He knows, because of an old lecture, that serpents bred for killing often resist direct control if their master is weakened. He uses that, taunting, forcing the basilisk to focus on him, not on the unconscious girl. Fawkes's arrival isn't a miracle out of nowhere. It's the visible answer to years of quiet loyalty between boy and Phoenix. And then the aftermath. Dumbledore returns to a chamber-soaked Harry, robes shredded, venom burns half-healed, cradling Ginny like she's the last fragile piece of family he has left. How much danger do you permit a child you've trained for war? How much trust was wisdom, and how much was abdication? That conversation in the hospital wing is not a scolding, it's a reckoning. Harry, hoarse, points out that if he hadn't gone, Ginny would be dead. Dumbledore, equally hoarse, admits that he has been teaching Harry to do precisely this. Step where adults cannot. This changes everything, because they both see the pattern now. Later, when the ward is quiet, Harry sits by Ginny's bed. She wakes in snatches, flinching at shadows only she can see. He understands. They are both marked by Tom Riddle, both carrying memories that are not entirely their own. Under Dumbledore's watchful eye, this isn't brushed away as childish foolishness. It's named as violation, as survival, as something they will have to heal from together. What does it mean in this timeline for Harry's first great victory to also bind him to Ginny through shared trauma and shared defiance? And when the next dark object whispers to a lonely child, will these two be the ones who hear it first? The weight of secrets, Dumbledore adjusts his plan. So when the whispers fade and the diary is locked away, we hit a quieter, sharper crisis. Not in the chamber, but in Dumbledore's office. What happens when the man who built the plan finally admits the plan is broken, he does not do it in public. He does it one late night to McGonagall, fire low, tea untouched. "I had hoped," he says, and the word hangs there, heavy, "that by placing him here, by surrounding him with magic and affection, danger might hesitate." McGonagall's mouth thins. 2 years, she answers, and he has faced Quirrell's possession and a basilisk inside Hogwarts. The implication is brutal. The school, his sanctuary, is not safe enough for this child. This changes everything. This isn't a story about Dumbledore as flawless chess master. It's a story about a tired general realizing the battlefield is his own home. So he adjusts, not in grand speeches, but in timetables and lesson plans. Harry's special tutorials stop being charming enrichment and become a curriculum. Third-year transfiguration theory is quietly replaced, once a week, with structured defensive drills, shield charms, disarming, controlled stunners, taught not as thrilling dueling, but as non-negotiable life skills. And then there is the mind. In canon, Occlumency comes too late, framed as punishment and secrecy. Here, Dumbledore cannot afford to wait. He reframes it, softly, as mental discipline. Breathing exercises in the evenings, guided meditations that, oh, so incidentally, teach Harry to recognize when something foreign presses against his thoughts. What if the boy who lived learns to close his mind before Voldemort ever manages to open that connection? But because Dumbledore is who he is, the training is never just technical. He starts talking, carefully, more explicitly, about Voldemort's likely return. Not names and dates, not Horcruxes yet, but patterns. Some magics, he tells Harry, leave echoes. Some tyrants do not stay gone. He is raising a child he knows may have to die, and that knowledge sits between every sentence. Every new spell he teaches is both a gift and a weaponization. Every praise of Harry's quick wand work carries a silent addendum. This may save you. This may be what I one day ask you to use. Harry feels it. Of course he does. This Harry has grown up under Dumbledore's roof. He can read the weather of the man's moods as easily as the Scottish sky. He notices when the eyes behind the half-moon's spectacles go distant and assessing, when my boy sounds less grandfatherly and more like a commander reviewing a promising recruit. What does it do to your trust when the person who tucks you in is also clearly calculating your odds of survival? Pattern interrupt. Imagine Harry, 13, refusing a spell. I don't want to learn that one, he says, jaw set, because it feels too much like killing. Dumbledore hesitates. Push, and he is a guardian. The tension between protection and empowerment is no longer abstract philosophy. It's a nightly negotiation over which line Harry will cross next. And still, in the quietest hours, Dumbledore's compromises are not with Harry, but with himself. When the boy is asleep and the castle is dark, he opens a locked drawer in his desk. His hand lingers over a blackened ring that should not yet, in this timeline, be his, but is. A Horcrux cracked but not destroyed, humming with a poison he understands too well. How much of this darkness will Harry one day have to see? How much will Dumbledore choose to show him? And how much will the war force upon them both? The drawer closes, the wards hum, and somewhere in the castle, the boy who lived dreams. unaware that the next phase of his growing up has already begun. Third year without the cupboard trauma, Sirius Black escapes. By the time the drawer closes on that cracked Horcrux, another door is opening. A calendar page turns, and we land in a third year that looks familiar on the surface. Hogsmeade permission slips, divination, a new defense professor, but is quietly, radically different underneath. Because this Harry doesn't walk into September as a boy with a blank space where his parents should be. He has stories. He has, quite literally, memories. In the years between that first bedtime tale and his 13th birthday, Dumbledore has done something Canon Dumbledore never quite dared. He has let Harry see James and Lily as people instead of legends. There are photographs on a shelf in the Headmaster's quarters, not hidden in a broken album at the bottom of a trunk. James, laughing with Sirius on a broom. Lily leaning over a cauldron, ink on her fingers. And, on certain carefully chosen evenings, there is a pensieve on the desk and a quiet question. Are you ready to see a little more? What does it do to a child to watch his parents move and speak in silvered memory, not as dying echoes, but as living, complicated adults? What if growing up means learning that your father pulled pranks and your mother lost her temper, that they argued and forgave and were afraid? This changes everything. Not because it erases the trauma of Godric's Hollow, but because it anchors that trauma in a fuller, warmer story. So when the Prophet headline screams, "Sirius Black escapes Azkaban," the boy in the tower doesn't just see a stranger's name. He sees the laughing young man from 3 different memories. Arms slung around James's shoulders, Lily's eyes narrowed in amused exasperation. He knows already that Sirius was not some distant Death Eater, but his parents' friend and alleged betrayer. Dumbledore has told him so, not with hushed deflection, but with that new, deliberate frankness. This isn't a story about simple monsters and saints, Harry, he said more than once. It is a story about choices. That honesty has consequences. When McGonagall's voice shakes at the staff table, when the castle buzzes with rumors, Harry doesn't cling to blissful ignorance. He understands, with a clarity canon Harry only reaches much later, that a man who once knew every corner of his parents' lives might now be hunting him. Hogwarts, which has always been home, suddenly feels like a chessboard. The moving staircases are no longer just fun, they are lines of sight. The portraits that gossip are also witnesses. Home has become a potential hunting ground, and then the Dementors arrive. Canon Harry collapses under the weight of unprocessed horror, hearing his mother's screams for the first time. This Harry has heard those words before, described gently by Dumbledore, hinted at in McGonagall's tight silences, framed by stories of defiance and love. But because he has seen James and Lily alive in the pensieve, the Dementors don't just drag him back to a single night. They rip him between 2 realities. The warm memory of his parents laughing in the Gryffindor common room slams against the sound of Lily begging for his life. Protection and helplessness, side by side. Dumbledore, seeing this, goes further than in canon. He does not simply banish Dementors from the pitch and leave Harry with half-truths. He explains more plainly who Sirius was, why the Ministry believes what it does, and why he himself is not entirely certain. He trusts that a boy raised in these corridors, loved but never coddled, can hold ambiguity without breaking. And Harry, shaped by years of being taught to question easy narratives, makes a quiet, dangerous decision. He will learn to survive Sirius Black. Yes, learn the Patronus, learn the castle's blind spots, lean on the family that has claimed him. But he will also learn the truth about betrayal, about friendship, about who exactly is hunting whom. Because this isn't a story about a frightened child running from a faceless killer. It's about a 13-year-old standing in the shadow of his parents' memories, choosing to walk toward the mystery instead of away from it. So, let's explore what happens when that determination collides with the reality of the man in the shrieking shack. Godfather, not monster. A different reunion in the shrieking shack. We drop into the shrieking shack, not with a boy who thinks he knows nothing, but with a boy who has heard these names in the quiet hours of Dumbledore's office. Sirius Black, the laughing one in Hagrid's half-finished stories, the friend Dumbledore never quite explains. Remus Lupin, the shy, clever prefect McGonagall once mentioned when Harry asked what his father had been like in class. In canon, those names hit Harry like curses. Here, they land like puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. So when Sirius, gaunt and wild-eyed, rasps that he's Harry's godfather, this Harry doesn't just see a murderer from the Prophet. He sees the shadow of the man Hagrid wept over without realizing. He hears Dumbledore's careful past tense when speaking of your father's friends, and suddenly realizes, no one ever actually said Sirius betrayed them. They only said it was believed. This changes everything, not because Harry is suddenly trusting, but because he has been raised to watch adults argue. To hear McGonagall challenge Dumbledore in staff meetings he was supposed to be reading quietly through, to see that even the greatest wizard of the age can be wrong. He's grown up in a castle where policy and war are debated over tea. He knows stories have missing pages. So when Lupin steps between them, voice shaking, and asks to explain, Harry doesn't shout him down. He demands evidence. How did you survive? Why didn't you come? What does Pettigrew have to do with Ron's rat? He's furious, yes, but his fury is disciplined, the way Dumbledore has drilled into him for occlumency practice. Feel it, then ask the next question. And then Snape arrives. In this timeline, Snape hasn't just hated a faceless Potter from afar. He has watched Harry grow up under Dumbledore's wing, watched that messy black hair bent over essays in the Headmaster's office, heard that laugh echo down corridors James once haunted. For him, Sirius and Lupin are not only old schoolyard ghosts, they are the embodiment of everything Dumbledore chose instead of Severus, protecting Harry, trusting the Marauder's memory over Snape's pain. His rage here is volcanic. He isn't just arresting a fugitive. He is trying to tear down an entire narrative that has excluded him. When Harry steps between Snape and Sirius, wand raised but voice steady, it cuts deeper because Snape has seen that stance before. In Dumbledore, shielding the boy. This isn't a story about a lonely child begging to escape the Dursleys with the first adult who offers. Harry already has a guardian. He has curfew lectures in the Headmaster's office, quiet Christmases with forks humming in the corner, a sense that he is wanted. So the offer Sirius makes, come live with me, means something different. It isn't rescue, it's expansion. What if you could have more than one grown-up claim you? What if family doesn't mean choosing between the man who raised you and the man who should have? Harry doesn't say yes immediately. He asks, almost clinically, what guardianship would mean, what Dumbledore would think, whether Sirius is ready for that responsibility after 12 years in Azkaban. By the time the dust settles, by the time the truth about Pettigrew has been dragged into the light and then snatched away again, we get an image canon never had. Harry in the hospital wing, Dumbledore on one side of the bed, Sirius, cleared only in a small private circle for now, on the other. Two men, both reaching for him in different ways. Harry realizes his life is no longer defined by a hole where his parents should be, but by the complicated abundance of people who love him, and sometimes hurt each other, while trying to protect him. And as he looks between them and makes his first real demand of Dumbledore, the timeline tilts toward a choice that will echo all the way to the final battle. Two homes, one war. Harry between Dumbledore and Sirius. Harry's demand doesn't end in a shouting match. It ends in parchment. Because once he says, "I won't go back to people who don't know me," there's no tidy canon solution. Dumbledore can't shove him at the Dursleys. He won't hand him to Sirius and walk away. This changes everything. It forces the adults who love him into the one arena they both avoid when they can: ministry paperwork. So what happens when the boy who lived already has a home in the castle and a godfather suddenly free and furious to claim him? In this timeline, Dumbledore moves faster after the Shrieking Shack. He leans on his titles, his quiet alliances, and on Harry's own clear, detailed testimony. Pettigrew is hunted with a seriousness the canon never gave him. A captured rat animagus, a Veritaserum-soaked trial, and a public apology later, Sirius Black is cleared before Harry's 4th year even begins. But because Harry has been growing up under Dumbledore's direct protection, the question isn't, where do we put this orphan? It's, how do we share him? And that is a much more uncomfortable question. We can imagine the meeting. Dumbledore in a plain navy robe, no twinkle, sitting across from Sirius in a borrowed set of Aurora Greys that don't quite fit his frame yet. Molly there as the third point of the triangle, because Harry is also her boy. They aren't wealthy. They aren't influential. They are the ones who actually packed Harry's trunk and watched him grow. Dumbledore offers stability, legal guardianship maintained, Hogwarts as primary residence, access to the kind of magical education you only get when your bedtime stories are about Grindelwald's fall and ancient ward theory. Sirius offers something else entirely. A rebuilt Grimmauld place, stripped of dark artifacts, or maybe a wind-battered cottage on a cliff, where the wards hum but the rules don't. A motorbike in the shed, a framed photo of James that laughs too loudly at midnight. This isn't a story about one man being right and the other wrong. It's about a boy who suddenly has 2 doors open and no map for what choosing means. So, let's explore the compromise they hammer out. Dumbledore remains the legal guardian and primary educator. Hogwarts is home base, the place of routines and essays, and quiet talks about prophecy that arrive a year earlier than in canon. Sirius becomes the designated summer parent. Half the holidays at Grimmauld or the cottage, some Hogsmeade weekends under heavy disillusionment, a godfather-shaped escape hatch. And in the middle of that treaty is Harry. This Harry has opinions. He's old enough to notice that Sirius's freedom feels exhilarating but precarious, that Dumbledore's guidance feels safe but threaded with secrets. He starts to realize that where he sleeps affects who he hears whispers from, which plans he gets invited into, how close he stands to the center of the coming war. Pattern interrupt. At 13, most of us are negotiating curfews. Harry is negotiating custody agreements between a headmaster and an ex-prisoner. By the time the Triwizard Tournament looms, he's learned something quietly radical. Adults can be managed, not manipulated in a cruel sense, but steered. One evening at the Burrow, we find him at the kitchen table with 2 letters, both about the same incident. A strange dream, a scar twinge, a name he heard in the dark. To Sirius, he writes about fear and anger, about wanting to hex someone, about James and what his dad would have done. To Dumbledore, he writes about patterns and symbols, about what this might mean for Voldemort's followers, about whether the wards at Hogwarts can be adjusted. As the ink dries, he realizes he's telling the same story in 2 different languages, calibrating himself to 2 different kinds of love. And in doing so, he's not just being raised by Dumbledore and Sirius. He's learning, quietly and deliberately, how to raise them to meet the war he knows is coming. 4th year, a trained champion enters the Triwizard. By 4th year, that quiet education in how to raise Dumbledore and Sirius meets its first true public trial by fire. Canon gives us a Harry thrown into the Triwizard Tournament bewildered, undertrained, and emotionally isolated. But what if the boy walking into that great hall has spent 3 extra summers dueling with his guardian, practicing Occlumency basics over Coco, and treating Hogwarts itself as both playground and obstacle course? This changes everything about what it means when blue-white flame spits out the name Harry Potter. This Harry has already stunned a fully grown Death Eater in 3rd year, because Dumbledore insisted he learn non-verbal shields early. He's learned to breathe through the pressure of hostile eyes at Wizengamot hearings, standing just behind Dumbledore's chair. He knows the difference between a prank and a political move. When the goblet glows, he's cataloguing exits, scanning the staff table, feeling the subtle pressure of legilimency against his mental shields, the way another 14-year-old might feel a draft. So when his name emerges, he doesn't just think, how? He thinks, who benefits? Is this Voldemort, testing the wards around Dumbledore's ward? Is it a Ministry faction, eager to embarrass the headmaster by endangering his famous charge? Or is it someone closer? Someone who knows that forcing Harry into a public spectacle forces Dumbledore to play by public rules. You can almost see the calculation flicker behind his eyes as the hall erupts. Dumbledore's reaction in this timeline is not the vaguely frazzled demand of canon. It is an instant, icy stillness. Guardian first, he wants to slam his hand over the goblet, to declare the tournament void, to send Harry straight back to the private quarters of his office, and lock the door with every ward he knows. Headmaster and political leader second, he walks down the aisle with measured steps, because he understands that in front of students, staff, visiting ministries, and foreign headmasters, this isn't a story about one boy. It's a referendum on his judgment. He asks Harry if he put his name in the goblet, but the question lands differently here. Harry hears not suspicion but ritual, the formal line Dumbledore must walk to protect the school's legitimacy. And that, ironically, is where the fracture opens. Because for 14 years, Harry has been taught that Dumbledore will upend entire systems to protect him. Now, in the antechamber, he's watching the man who raised him argue case law with Barty Crouch, instead of simply saying, no. The realization hits hard. There are games even Albus Dumbledore cannot flip without consequence. Harry feels betrayed, and he tells him so. Quietly, through clenched teeth, Dumbledore, exhausted, admits the truth. Pulling Harry out might shatter alliances they need for the war he's been preparing Harry to face. The protection of one child is now tangled with the safety of many, and that is the pivot. Harry doesn't agree to compete because a magical contract says he must. He agrees because he has been raised to see his life as leverage in a larger fight. If he walks away and the tournament collapses, who dies instead? Which student, which champion, which nameless kid from Beauxbatons or Durmstrang becomes the target that was meant for him? This isn't a story about a reckless boy chasing glory. It's about a child weaponized by love, stepping forward with his eyes open. So, let's explore what it means when every task is not just a puzzle or a dragon, but a moral calculus he has been trained, painfully, to solve. Tasks, training, and trust. The Tri-Wizard through a different lens. So when the egg screeches in the bath and the clue resolves into Mersong, this Harry doesn't just panic and hope for a last-minute miracle. He recognizes a pattern, a hostage, a time limit, a moral trap dressed up as a school task. Dumbledore can't sit him down and say, here is how you outfly a dragon and outthink a Merpersum council. The tournament rules won't allow it, and the politics around his ward are already knife-sharp. But because he raised Harry in a castle full of experts, he can tilt the board. Suddenly, Flitwick spends 3 weeks on advanced shield charms and silent casting. Lupin is invited back for a guest lecture series on non-lethal dueling and boggart psychology that just happens to cover fear management under pressure. Moody drills situational awareness into the upper years, turning every corridor into a lesson on ambushes and escape routes. This isn't a story about secret cheat codes whispered in the headmaster's office. It's about a boy who has been taught from childhood that information is the first line of defense. So Harry builds a network. He asks Cedric for the Hufflepuff perspective on fairness. He braves Fleur's cool disdain to ask how Beauxbatons trains for underwater spellwork. He watches Crumb fly, not as a fan, but as someone cataloguing angles, acceleration, how a champion moves when the world is watching. This Harry doesn't go into the first task alone. He has Ginny and Ron running mock obstacle courses on the Quidditch pitch at dawn, Hermione timing his spell sequences and annotating weaknesses, the twins accidentally testing distraction tactics that might throw off a dragon's aim. Hogwarts becomes his war room, not his backdrop. But the cost is that he cannot pretend this is just a game. Each task is a rehearsal. The dragon is a Death Eater with overwhelming firepower. The lake is a hostage situation with unclear rules of engagement. The maze is a battlefield where the enemy is not just outside you, but inside your own fear. Growing up in Dumbledore's orbit means Harry has heard too many stories of Grindelwald, too many quiet confessions from portraits and professors. He knows what real war looks like. The tournament feels like a dress rehearsal he never asked for, but has been trained to recognize. That awareness strains his friendships in new ways. Ron's jealousy when Harry's name comes out of the goblet is sharper because he has watched his best friend receive private lessons, closed-door conversations, a level of access no other student has. But it's also shorter-lived because Molly has spent years hammering home that Harry's special treatment is a burden, not a prize. Hermione, meanwhile, is the one who looks at Dumbledore and asks in a low, furious voice whether it was always the plan to raise Harry for this, whether the loving guardian and the general have ever truly been separate men. By the third task, when the hedges loom and the air hums wrong, Harry walks in with his eyes open. He and Cedric have already agreed they watch each other's backs. They share information. They refuse to let the schools be turned into rival factions when a darker war is brewing beyond the pitch. So when they reach the cup and the hair on Harry's arms rises, he hesitates. Just a breath. Just long enough to register that the magic here feels less like a trophy and more like a portkey. He could walk away. He could drag Cedric back and demand Dumbledore dismantle the maze. Instead, he thinks of the prophecy he half knows, the training he's had, the way Dumbledore once told him that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to step forward anyway. They take the cup together. The hook yanks, the world spins, and in the graveyard that waits, we finally see whether a boy raised by Dumbledore walks into the trap or walks into the war he's been preparing for all his life. The graveyard and the grandfather. Voldemort returns. Harry hits the graveyard ground, already naming things. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. This isn't a story about a boy bewildered by dark magic he's never seen. This is a story about a ward of Dumbledore who's had to translate half-whispered Latin on old parchment in the headmaster's office, who's been warned that there are rituals so old the ministry doesn't even have words for them anymore. So when he sees the cauldron, the bundle, the pale hand of Pettigrew, he knows. And knowing makes it worse, because now every motion has meaning. The grave is not just a grave. It is a symbol of lineage twisted, a father's bones weaponized against his own son's sacrifice. The knife is not just a blade. It is the culmination of 1,000 theoretical discussions about blood magic, made suddenly, brutally practical. This Harry understands that what's being done to him is not random cruelty, but deliberate rewriting of the war's original wound. He is terrified. Of course he is. But the fear sits beside training. He tracks the wand movements even as his blood drips into the cauldron. He catalogues the runes carved into the stone. He remembers Dumbledore's voice saying very calmly that sometimes surviving means observing long enough to understand what you must later destroy. Then Voldemort stands reborn, and we hit our pattern interrupt. Because in canon, Harry hears a monologue and feels small. Here he hears a narrative and starts editing. Voldemort speaks of greatness, of abandonment, of power seized by sheer will. Harry hears the echoes of another voice. Late nights in the office, Dumbledore laying out Tom Riddle's childhood in careful, sorrowful detail. The orphanage, the trophies stolen, the refusal to believe in love because it could not be controlled. So when Voldemort calls himself self-made, Harry silently supplies, and self-wounded. When Voldemort sneers at weakness, Harry thinks of Molly Weasley's arms around him after nightmares and understands that Tom has no language for that strength. This changes everything. Not because Harry is suddenly invulnerable, but because he can see the gaps, the lies, the places where Voldemort's story does not quite meet the facts. His defiance isn't just teenage bravado. It's a historian's quiet, furious disagreement. And then the duel. Wands connect, gold light arches, and priori incantatum blooms not as inexplicable miracle, but as half-remembered theory made real. Harry has heard Dumbledore speculate about twin cores, seen sketches on parchment. He has also grown up under portraits of James and Lily, heard Hagrid's embellished tales, and McGonagall's drier corrections traced his mother's smile in moving photographs. So when the echoes emerge, it feels like bedtime stories walking out of the frame and into a nightmare. Lily's face is not a stranger's. It is the woman he has been measuring himself against his whole life. James is not just a Quidditch legend. He is the laugh in every story Sirius ever told by the fire. Their guidance is both impossibly new and intimately familiar, and it almost breaks him. Almost. Back at Hogwarts, the aftermath is not abstract strategy. Dumbledore listens to the halting account of curses, of pain, of bone and blood, and this is not a general debriefing a soldier. This is a grandfather hearing how his child was carved up to resurrect the man who killed his family. His fury is cold, his grief is visible. The war he has been planning for since 1981 has finally kicked down the door of his school and taken his boy. When the noise dies, when Fudge leaves in denial and the castle settles into frightened whispers, we end in the quiet. Dumbledore and Harry in the office. No more lies about whether Voldemort is back. No more softening of prophecies. Just two people who both understand that every year of Harry's growing up has been leading here, and that from this night on, childhood is over. So, let's explore what it means when the next move in this war is planned not by a distant headmaster and a lonely hero, but by family. 5th year, without the silent treatment, the Order and the DAA. So what happens to year 5 when the war is no longer being run on parallel tracks, with Harry on one and Dumbledore on another, never quite meeting? What if, instead of the cold silence of canon, we get a boy who's spent his whole life in this headmaster's orbit, being asked to step closer, not pushed away? In the original timeline, Dumbledore tells us he avoided Harry's eyes all year because he feared the connection to Voldemort. That logic barely holds even there. Here, with a child he has raised, mentored, and watched fall asleep on a transfigured sofa in his office, it collapses. This Harry, has been taught occlumency basics before he learned long division. He knows that mind magic is dangerous, that possession is possible, that love is not the same as indulgence. Dumbledore can still fear that snake-like presence behind the scar, but because he has already chosen honesty over mystification, he cannot justify vanishing emotionally and calling it protection. So instead of distance, we get boundaries. We get Dumbledore saying, plainly, if you feel him, you tell me. If you see something, we test it. We get scheduled pensive debriefs of dreams, not shouted accusations in a dungeon. Snape may still be the one to drill shields into Harry's mind, but he does it under explicit orders that this is training, not punishment. Harry walks into those lessons furious and frightened, yes, but not abandoned. And because the secret war is no longer a rumor whispered between teenagers, Harry is pulled more formally into the Order's orbit. He doesn't sit in on every meeting. He's 15, not a general. But he is allowed in for certain briefings, seated between Molly and Arthur, hearing Mad Eye growl about Death Eater raids and Kingsley break down Fudge's smear campaign. He learns why the Prophet matters, why Percy's defection hurts politically as well as personally, why protecting witnesses is as vital as dueling Death Eaters. This isn't a story about a boy stumbling into the Resistance. It's about a junior member of a war household being told, at last, the shape of the battlefield. From that, the DA grows almost inevitably. In canon, it's rebellion against Umbridge and isolation. Here, it's continuity. Harry has been training in controlled environments since childhood. Shield drills with McGonagall, silent casting exercises with Dumbledore, mock duels with trusted Order members over summer. When Umbridge bans practical magic, the question isn't, should we break the rules? It's, do I have a responsibility to pass on what I've been given? The room of requirement becomes less secret club, more underground classroom where a boy raised in a war teaches his peers how to survive one. Does that fix his head? Of course not. He still wakes shaking from visions of corridors and doors. He still carries the prophecy's weight, now fully spoken in every choice. Being treated as a junior partner in the fight means he's less lonely, but more accountable. When someone is hurt, he can no longer tell himself adults were in charge. That's its own kind of burden. And the Department of Mysteries, that's the real test of this altered timeline. Will a Harry who has been trained to doubt visions, to verify information, to call Dumbledore before charging in, still sprint into that trap for Sirius? Or will Voldemort, facing a boy who feels heard and included, have to weave a subtler lure than a single screaming dream? So, let's explore what happens when the prophecy's pawn has been raised to question the board itself. The prophecy finally spoken, raised to die, raised to choose. So when the prophecy finally comes, it doesn't crash into a neglected 15-year-old in a hospital wing. It walks into a teenager who has grown up doing homework in Dumbledore's office, who has heard the word destiny murmured over tea and lemon drops for years, and who has learned to ask, why? Dumbledore does not summon him in a panic after the Department of Mysteries. He invites him one quiet evening when the castle is mostly asleep and Fawkes is the only witness. The pensieve is already on the desk. The battered cabinet with the spinning, whirring instruments is silent, as if even they understand that this conversation will not be interrupted by tinkering. Harry knows it's coming. This Harry has pieced together fragments. That there was a prophecy, that Voldemort acted on incomplete information, that Dumbledore has been circling its exact wording for years. What if tonight is when the circling finally stops? What if the man who raised him stops speaking in metaphors and starts giving him the lines that have been steering his life since before he could walk? Dumbledore shows him the memory first, Trelawney's harsh, echoing voice. The words about power the Dark Lord knows not. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord either must die at the hand of the other. Canon Harry hears this as a revelation. This Harry hears it as confirmation of a horrible suspicion. Because suddenly, all those extra dueling lessons at 12, The Occlumency drills at 13, the way Dumbledore pushed him toward leadership at 14, click into a single brutal pattern. He isn't angry that there was a secret. He is angry at the orchestration, at realizing that bedtime stories about Grindelwald, gentle talks about sacrifice, even the way Dumbledore framed love as the greatest protection, have also been training modules, not just to protect, but to prepare him to die. And here's where this timeline cuts deeper. This isn't a story about a distant headmaster playing chess with a boy he barely knows. This is a guardian who healed his fevers, who let him feed Fawkes scraps of bacon, who watched him grow up between staff meetings. When Harry says, voice shaking, "You raised me for this," Dumbledore cannot retreat behind titles or necessity. His guilt is not abstract. It is paternal. He admits it. Not cleanly, not without self-justification, but he does. He speaks of inevitability, of how Voldemort marked Harry, of how preparing him was the only mercy he could offer. But because they have a real relationship, Harry can push back. He asks, "Did you ever once ask if I wanted to die for this world?" That's the moral fulcrum. This Harry has been taught that love is worth dying for, yes, but he has also been taught by Dumbledore, by McGonagall, by the entire castle, that his life has value beyond his scar. So he refuses the binary. He does not scream that he won't do it. He does not meekly agree to walk into the forest. He says very quietly, "Then we find another way. I'll fight him. I'll face him. But I will not walk into slaughter while you still have secrets." And then he leaves. Not shattered, but set. He walks out of that office carrying the full weight of the prophecy and a new, dangerous conviction that he is allowed to want to live. This changes everything for the Horcrux hunt, because now the question isn't just how to kill Voldemort. It's whether Dumbledore, faced with a Harry who refuses to be a willing lamb, will finally put every card on the table, or whether Harry will have to pry the last, darkest secret from his mentor's cold, dead hands. 6th year, Horcruxes, Hallows, and a longer-lived Dumbledore. 6th year opens with a different kind of secret council. Not a frail headmaster hoarding memories, but an old wizard at his desk and his ward across from him. Chairs pulled close, a pensieve between them. What if the Horcrux hunt wasn't a lonely pilgrimage, but a family project, hammered out in late-night strategy sessions over cocoa and lemon drops? This changes everything. In canon, Dumbledore keeps the theory of Horcruxes locked behind euphemism and omission until it's almost too late. Here, the man who watched Harry grow up in Hogwarts corridors, who saw him fall off brooms and study for OLLs at the kitchen table, knows exactly how reckless and how stubborn this Harry can be when shut out. So he makes a different choice. He sits Harry down in August, lays out Riddle's life, the diary, the ring, the locket in Grimmauld Place, and says quietly, "We are going to destroy them together." That "we" means the timeline bends. It means that by Christmas, Harry has walked through more of Tom Riddle's memories than in canon, not as a passive viewer, but as an analyst, arguing with Dumbledore about patterns and hiding places. It means the cave isn't the first real mission. Maybe they've already retrieved Hufflepuff's cup from a warded vault with Bill's curse-breaking help, or at least identified it and set goblin politics in motion. It means the Order isn't guessing about Horcruxes in the dark. Molly and Arthur don't know every detail, but they know enough to understand why their boy and his guardian come back from certain trips, pale and shaking. Pattern interrupt. Picture this: Harry standing in the room of requirement in October, not searching for Malfoy's secrets, but testing whether a room that hides things might also hide a diadem. He doesn't find it yet. The story isn't that neat. But because he's looking, the diadem becomes a live question earlier, a thread the narrative keeps tugging. And then there's Snape. This isn't a story about a teacher who only knows Harry as James's echo across a classroom. For 15 years, he's had to watch Dumbledore read bedtime stories in the staff wing, had to brew potions for childhood fevers, had to see Lily's eyes light up when Harry masters a shield charm at 12. Being partially drawn into that upbringing means his contempt has been interrupted over and over by inconvenient flashes of protectiveness. So when Dumbledore, cursed and weakening, extracts the promise to end his life, the request hits a man whose relationship to the boy on the tower is far more entangled. Killing Dumbledore won't just be about obedience and espionage. It will mean shattering the only stable family structure Harry has ever known. Does Dumbledore still choose that death? Here, the calculus wobbles. He still believes in self-sacrifice. He still fears the ring's curse. But because he has watched Harry cling to him after nightmares, because he's been called Dad once by accident in a moment of panic, he hesitates to make Harry watch him die. Maybe he pushes harder for alternatives, more aggressive curse research with Snape and Madame Pomfrey. Contingency plans that keep him alive a few crucial months longer. A version of the tower scene where his death is delayed, not embraced. So when they return from the cave, the difference is immediate. Harry isn't stunned and dragged along. He's half supporting Dumbledore, both of them shaking, both of them knowing exactly what the green potion cost. The dark mark hangs over Hogwarts, sickly and familiar. The tower looms, and as they mount the stairs together, sharing a look that holds 15 years of love and argument and chosen family, the question isn't just whether Draco will lower his wand, it's whether, this time, Dumbledore intends to die at all. The Astronomy Tower rewritten. Can Harry save Dumbledore? The tower is the same, and not the same. The dark mark hangs above them. The wind claws at their robes. But this time, Dumbledore's hand is not the only one on the railing. Harry is there, not frozen under a cloak, not silenced by a body bind. He is swaying from the potion, wand already in his hand, because Dumbledore has been training him for this since he was old enough to stand on a chair in the headmaster's office and say, very seriously, that he wanted to help. What if the boy on the tower isn't a hidden witness, but a declared heir to Dumbledore's war? What if the man beside him has finally stopped pretending Harry can be protected by ignorance? This changes everything. Dumbledore still weakens. The curse in his hand still burns. But because this Harry has spent 15 years arguing with him over every omission and half-truth, the script shifts. When Draco bursts through the door, breathless and terrified, he finds 2 wands, 2 sets of blue-green eyes, and a headmaster who does not say, Harry, hide. Instead, Dumbledore says, very calmly, Harry, stay. We have to imagine what that does to Draco. In canon, he has power, a wand on a disarmed old man, the illusion of control. Here, he's facing the boy who grew up in the castle Draco called home away from home in summers. The boy he saw at faculty dinners, perched between McGonagall and Hagrid, passing the peas. They're not friends, but they are inconveniently familiar. Malfoy, Harry says. And it isn't a schoolyard challenge. It's weary. It's 17. It's someone who has watched Lucius fall and knows exactly what fear looks like in a child of important men. You don't want this. Does Draco lower his wand? Maybe not. Fear is louder than reason, and the Death Eaters behind him are a weight between his shoulder blades. But Harry can name that fear. He can talk fast and low about Azkaban, about Narcissa, about what it means when Voldemort marks you as useful. He can offer, in Dumbledore's language, sanctuary. And Dumbledore, hearing all this, makes his own choice. This isn't a story about Dumbledore suddenly clinging to life out of cowardice. It's about him having raised a child who will not accept a plan that requires his guardian's quiet execution. So instead of surrendering completely, he bargains differently. He lets Snape kill the legend, perhaps, drops from the tower in a blaze of green, but not before binding protections to Harry in front of everyone, naming him publicly as ward and successor. Or, in another version of this same night, he does not die at all. He lets Snape maim him, destroy his wand hand, fake the killing blow with layered magic. He sacrifices power, not breath, because Harry is watching, and he cannot ask his son to endure that shattering. Either way, Harry's psyche is scorched. If Dumbledore falls, Harry doesn't just lose a mentor, he watches his parent die at arm's length, unable to stop it, despite all the training, all the nights practicing non-verbal spells in a lamplit office. If Dumbledore lives but is broken, Harry understands, with horrible clarity, that Hogwarts, the only home he has ever known, is no longer enough to protect their family. So he stands on the tower afterward, wind tearing at his hair, Dumbledore gone or carried below, and he is holding a locket that hums wrong in his hand. It is not what it seems. The note inside is a taunt, a puzzle, a promise that the war is bigger than one tower, one fall, one headmaster. He looks back at the castle that raised him, the portraits who told him bedtime stories, the elves who snuck him cocoa, the teachers who became aunts and uncles, and knows he may have to walk away from all of it, because the Horcrux hunt isn't an errand anymore. It's the only way to make sure no other child grows up on a battlefield. So, let's explore what it means when Harry Potter leaves the home that loved him to finish the war Dumbledore began, leaving home to save it, a different Horcrux hunt. He doesn't run from Privet Drive in the dead of night. He walks out through the front doors of Hogwarts. Not a jailbreak, an exile. What if the Horcrux hunt begins not as an escape from abuse, but as the moment Dumbledore's ward is told he is to abandon the only home he has ever known to save it? This changes everything about how those endless nights in the tent feel. In canon, the forest is freedom. Here, every flap of canvas is a reminder he is sleeping outside, while his castle family is under siege. Because in this timeline, Harry grew up tracing the grooves on the staff room table, feeding crumbs to portraits who tutored him in history of magic. racing Filch's cat down the 7th floor corridor. When he leaves, he isn't just leaving school. He is leaving the nursery that became a fortress, the fortress that became a family. Each time he casts protective charms around a campsite, part of him feels he is cheating on the ancient wards that once wrapped around his bed. This Harry, does not stumble blindly into the Deathly Hallows myth. Dumbledore, who raised him among whispered biographies and dusty artifacts, has already told him bedtime stories about the Peverils and the wand that changed the course of dueling history. He has explained, in that maddeningly patient voice, why the cloak he gave Harry is not merely a schoolboy's toy, but a relic that must never be flaunted. So when Xenophilius sketches the triangle, Harry doesn't feel obsession flare. He feels recognition and suspicion. This isn't a story about a boy seduced by a new quest. It's about a young commander refusing to be distracted from the old one, because Dumbledore has drilled into him that Horcruxes mean people's souls are held hostage. And Harry has spent a lifetime watching what that does to the portraits and ghosts who linger half alive in these corridors. The Hallows are power. The Horcruxes are prisoners. Ron and Hermione feel that difference too. They aren't just following their traumatized friend into the dark. They are flanking the headmaster's ward, the boy who has been groomed for leadership in staff meetings and order briefings since he was tall enough to see over the table. Sometimes that helps. When Harry says, "We move tonight," there is a steadiness in his voice that makes Ron trust the plan and Hermione swallow her fear. Sometimes it hurts. When he forgets to ask, when he issues orders, not invitations, resentment simmers. Who made him general and them lieutenants? In our version, Dumbledore is dead, but he is not absent. He has left pensive vials in a locked drawer of his old desk, wards keyed to Harry's magical signature, letters that only unseal when certain curses are broken, guidance, yes, but also manipulation from beyond the grave. Each Horcrux they destroy unlocks another memory, another revelation about how long this plan has been running, and how young Harry was when it began. And with every locket shattered, every cup melted, Harry feels two currents pulling at him. Pride, because the war Dumbledore mapped out is finally turning. Grief, because each victory is another step away from the childhood he had in those stone corridors. The question hanging over the last Horcrux isn't just, can we find it? It's, when the plan ends, who does Harry get to be without it? The castle's child returns, Hogwarts as final battlefield. When Harry comes back, Hogwarts isn't just a stronghold on a hill, it's the house he learned to walk in. The corridor he once used as a racetrack on a toy broom, now gouged with blast marks and smeared with soot. What does it mean when your childhood home is the battlefield? Canon gives us a Harry who loves Hogwarts because it finally gave him belonging. This Harry loves it the way you love a parent who tucked you in and taught you to tie your shoes. Every corridor he sprints down under siege holds a memory. The staircase where he split his chin at 4 and Madame Pomfrey fussed. The unused classroom where McGonagall, off the record, showed him his first animagus transformation. The kitchens where the elves used to sneak him extra treacle tart when nightmares woke him. Seeing Death Eaters in those spaces isn't just frightening. It feels like a home invasion. This changes everything tactically, because Harry grew up here The castle isn't a maze. It's muscle memory. He doesn't just know there's a passage behind that tapestry. He remembers the exact creak in the third flagstone because he and Hagrid fixed it after he tripped at 8. So when the Order and the DA gather in the Room of Requirement, he isn't guessing. He's assigning routes the way other people assign chores. Neville, take the portrait corridor. Phineas Nigellus will sulk, but he'll warn you if anyone comes. Ginny, lead the younger years through the elf passages to the Hufflepuff basement. Harry knows which portraits along the way can shout for help. And the castle answers. Portraits that watched him grow from toddler to commander come alive in the chaos. Former headmasters bark advice, a young McGonagall in oils dueling in miniature as she shouts, "Left, Harry, left!" The fat lady, who once scolded him for muddy shoes, now screams warnings as curses streak past. Even the ghosts are different allies when you grew up feeding them gossip and questions. The Grey Lady doesn't just hint about the diadem. She hovers at his shoulder, directing him through hidden archways only a child raised among secrets would have learned to slip through. This isn't a story about a chosen one standing apart while adults close ranks around him. The adults here helped raise him. Madame Pomfrey, who changed his nappies, stands grim and wand-ready at his side. Flitwick, who once transfigured his toys to demonstrate proper wand movement, now layers shields over Harry's hastily cast Protegos. McGonagall fights with a ferocity that makes more sense when you remember she taught him to read before he ever held a textbook. So when the DA and the Order fight, they're not just defending a school, they're defending the child they collectively raised. The boy who spilled pumpkin juice on their robes and fell asleep in staff meetings because Dumbledore refused to leave him alone. It means the heroism is stubbornly, beautifully communal. And then the pattern breaks. The noise ebbs. Harry walks through the great hall, and this time the benches are lined with bodies. Fred, Remus, Tonks, Colin, people who have been constants for as long as he can remember. Every face is a memory. Every sheet is a bedtime story paid in full. As he moves between them, the choice crystallizes. The forest isn't just where he'll meet Voldemort. It's where every lesson, every sacrifice Dumbledore made in that office above finally demands an answer. What if the only way to protect this family, this castle, is to lay down the life it raised, walking into the forest with open eyes? So when he turns away from the camp and toward the trees, he isn't walking as a boy who has run out of options. He's walking as someone who has been told, for years, in a dozen quiet conversations, that love sometimes means stepping forward when every sane instinct screams to run. Canon Harry goes into the forest with a strange mix of numbness and grim courage. A child who has been thrown into danger so often that one more suicidal errand feels almost inevitable. This Harry has been prepared, not groomed. Dumbledore hasn't hidden the prophecy from him. He's unpacked it with him on long evenings, tea cooling on the saucer, asking, "What do you think it means to be the one with the power to vanquish?" The answer has never been, "You must die because you're expendable." It's been, "You may have to die because other people are not." This changes everything. As he walks, the internal monologue is crowded, not empty. He thinks of his parents, yes, faces he's seen in Pensieve silver and in the way Dumbledore's voice goes soft on the name, Lily. But because he's grown up in Hogwarts' shadow, he also thinks of McGonagall tucking a blanket more tightly around him in the staff quarters when he was 8 and feverish, pretending not to. He thinks of Hagrid's clumsy attempts at birthday cakes and crossbow safety lectures. He thinks of Dumbledore pacing in front of the fire, confessing his own youthful hunger for power as a warning, not a boast. And he thinks of the castle, of the way the staircases seemed to learn his stride, of portraits that called him lad rather than boy who lived. Hogwarts has been his childhood home and his training ground and his refuge. Walking into the forest now means protecting the only place that has ever felt wholly his. This isn't a story about a boy sacrificing himself to prove he deserves love. Growing up, he has never had to earn his place at the table in Dumbledore's quarters or in the Great Hall. It's been assumed. So when he fingers the resurrection stone, because Dumbledore has told him what it is and why it's dangerous, he isn't calling strangers from legend. He's summoning people he knows through a lifetime of stories and shared memories. James, who he's watched through Dumbledore's and Snape's unwillingly pooled recollections. Lily, whose handwriting he's seen on old Charms essays. Sirius, whose laugh still echoes from that one reckless summer. They are not theoretical parents and godfather. They are family he has built in retrospect, brick by careful brick. Does that make it easier to die or harder? He isn't walking into the forest to escape a world that has hurt him. He's walking to shield a world that has claimed him. That means the terror is sharper, but the choice is cleaner. And when Voldemort's curse hits, green, absolute, undeniable, it strikes a boy who has never doubted that he belongs somewhere. The question this timeline leaves hanging as the world goes dark is simple and enormous. If you die knowing you are loved, does King's Cross look different when you wake? King's Cross and the Headmaster's boy. King's Cross is still white and endless, but in this timeline, it doesn't feel anonymous. It feels, immediately, like the echo of a place Harry has known all his life. Vaulted ceilings, the faint smell of tea, the soft rustle of phoenix feathers. And there he is, not the distant chess master of canon, but the man who tucked him into a narrow camp bed beside the headmaster's office, who corrected his wand grip before he could read, who argued with Molly Weasley over bedtime. What does it mean when the person waiting in the light isn't just your mentor, but the man who raised you? This changes everything. Because when Dumbledore says, "Harry, I am so sorry," he isn't apologizing to a student he kept at arm's length. He is apologizing to the boy whose first word might well have been forks. The boy he walked to primary lessons in Hogsmeade under disillusionment. The boy he quietly trained in Occlumency years before Snape ever snarled his way through a lesson. He cannot hide behind the greater good now. This isn't a story about abstract strategy. It's about family. Dumbledore has to name the ugliest version of his own choice, that he raised a child for slaughter. He taught Harry to question authority, to value his own life, and then built a war plan that required that life to end. And the wound is sharper, because this Harry, walked into the forest knowing not just that he might die, but that he was stepping away from Sunday dinners at the Burrow and quiet evenings grading essays at Dumbledore's side. So Harry pushes back. More than in canon, he has the standing to do it. He can say, You told me I had a right to choose my own path. How is that true if you were steering me toward this from the moment you took me in? He can list the times he was nudged instead of informed, the half-truths about the prophecy, the way Horcrux theory was slipped into their shared reading, as though it were academic, not personal, because he has also known Dumbledore's love, birthday cakes in the Great Hall after hours, patient explanations of magical lore. His anger lands as betrayal, not rebellion, and Dumbledore has to accept it. He admits that he let fear of power, fear of his own past, turn Harry into a carefully prepared weapon wrapped in affection. He admits that trusting Harry's courage was easier than trusting Harry's right to an ordinary adulthood, which is exactly why Harry's choice to return is different. He doesn't go back only because he thinks he must finish the story he's been handed. He goes back because he decides, consciously, that surviving the war will mean rewriting that story. He wants to build a life that isn't just Headmaster's Ward, or Chosen One, or Honorary Weasley, but all of those and more on his own terms. When he steps into his body, he carries that decision with him. Not just the headmaster's boy, not just the boy who lived, someone who intends to live. The real question, as his eyes open in the forest and the battle roars on, is simple. What does a Harry who plans for tomorrow do with his victory tonight? After the war, who is Harry without the headmaster's shadow? Victory, in this timeline, doesn't give Harry a script. It gives him a question. When the dust settles and the dead are counted, what does a boy who has been Dumbledore's ward, Dumbledore's weapon, and Dumbledore's beloved child decide to be when he finally gets to just be Harry? Canon hands him Auror robes almost by default. Here, that path is still tempting. He knows dark magic, understands how it breathes. As an Auror, he could hunt down the remnants of Voldemort's network with terrifying efficiency. But because Hogwarts is both the place he was raised and the battlefield where he almost died, every raid, every interrogation would echo with Dumbledore's lessons on mercy. Does he become the Auror who refuses to repeat the excesses of the First War? The one who insists on trials, on rehabilitation, on remembering that Slytherin teenagers are not Death Eaters in waiting? Or does he stay? This Harry has memories of toddling down these corridors hand in hand with the headmaster, of learning to read under McGonagall's watchful eye, of sneaking pies from the kitchens with Hagrid cheering him on. Teaching defense isn't just a job. It means reclaiming a classroom that once trained him for death and turning it into a place that trains children for living. Imagine him dismantling the secrecy around the Horcrux War, turning it into a curriculum about propaganda, abuse of power, and how to say no when an adult tells you your life is expendable. There's a stranger path too. Researcher, even eventual headmaster. What if the boy who grew up in the Tower office eventually takes the chair behind that desk? This isn't a story about Harry becoming a Dumbledore clone. It's about the one person who knows exactly where his guardian was brilliant and where he was disastrously wrong. As headmaster, he could institutionalize what he and his friends fought for: trauma-informed care, student councils with real teeth, protections for Muggleborns that don't vanish when the political wind shifts. All of that depends on one thing: what happens to Dumbledore. If he dies in the war, Harry walks the world as the living embodiment of his guardian's choices. Every Wizengamot speech, every policy is measured against the question, is this what Albus would have done, and should I do it anyway? If Dumbledore lives, they have to renegotiate everything. No more prophecy hanging between them, no more secret lessons framed as destiny. Just an old man and the child he raised, arguing over whether Harry gets to choose obscurity or love, or a quiet research post in the Department of Mysteries. And Harry doesn't make that choice alone. He has other anchors. Maybe Sirius survives and drags him away from martyrdom with sheer reckless affection, insisting on motorbikes and bad holiday destinations. McGonagall remains the stern constant, the one who reminds him that brilliance is meaningless if he forgets to eat. Hagrid keeps inviting him for tea, as though he's still 11. Molly Weasley, even in this Dumbledore-raised AU, has claimed a corner of his heart. She fusses, sends jumpers, and pointedly asks when he's bringing someone home for Sunday dinner. Who is that someone? It might be Ginny, forged by the same war, unwilling to let him disappear into his own legend. It might be another partner entirely. The important thing is that Harry, who was raised by many adults and many portraits, understands that family is chosen again and again. He builds a home that is not a replica of Dumbledore's office or of the Burrow, but a hybrid. Books and chaos, strategy and laughter. If he has children, the real test of this timeline begins. He knows, viscerally, what it means to be groomed for a cause, even by someone who adores you. He remembers being taught legilimency not as a curiosity, but as a weapon, so he may overcorrect at first, shielding his children from any hint of prophecy, refusing to let them read certain chapters of history until they're older. Or, in his better moments, he tries to blend Dumbledore's wisdom with a gentler hand, teaching them occlumency as a form of emotional regulation, not as preparation for torture. Telling them the whole story of the war, including his own mistakes, so they learn that heroes are just people who kept choosing. Pattern interrupt. Imagine, years later, a visiting first year turning a corner and nearly colliding with Professor Potter, or Headmaster Potter, or simply Harry, guest lecturer. He pauses, apologizes, and then, when the child has hurried off, he keeps walking. Past the tapestry where he once hid from Filch, past the classroom where he learned the Patronus that saved his godfather, past the window where he once watched Dumbledore's phoenix blaze against the sky. He hears echoes. The slap of smaller feet, the murmur of a much younger voice asking impossible questions. Gratitude and grief walk beside him, inseparable. Hogwarts was his nursery and his battlefield, his sanctuary and his crucible. In this AU, after the war, it can finally become something else as well, the place where Harry Potter chooses every day to live. And the next choice he makes here will define not just his future, but the future of every child who passes through these doors in the new world he helped create. AU. What changes? What stays the same? So we've watched this Harry walk those corridors as a child, a student, and now a reformer. But how different is he, really, from the boy in canon who first arrived at Hogwarts, thin, angry, and starved for any scrap of affection? What if we pause the timeline here and hold both versions of Harry up to the light? Canon Harry grows up in a cupboard, learns he is unwanted before he learns he is magical, and walks into the Great Hall with the quiet conviction that he doesn't matter very much. Our Weasley-raised Harry arrived with a hand in Ron's and a seat already saved at the Gryffindor table. In this AU, he has no Dursley abuse. An early magical education, courtesy of a house full of wands and hand-me-down textbooks, and a deeper bond with Dumbledore that is built on regular contact rather than distant admiration. This changes everything about how he reads danger and how he reads himself. Both boys are brave, both are loyal. Both will walk into death for the people they love. But because Canon Harry's courage is forged in neglect and anger, it often burns hot and reckless. He flies after the stone because no one else will take him seriously. He plunges into the chamber because adults have failed Ginny, and he refuses to be that powerless boy in the cupboard again. He charges to the ministry for Sirius because the thought of losing the first real parent figure he's had is unbearable. This Harry, raised in a house where love is noisy and constant, is still self-sacrificing. But the texture is forged in responsibility and a sense of stewardship. He goes after the stone as part of a Weasley-anchored trio that has been taught, explicitly, that family faces danger together. The chamber becomes less a lone descent and more a coordinated rescue with adults he actually trusts, looped in earlier. When Sirius appears, Harry is not clutching at a single fragile lifeline. He is weighing the godfather he's just gained against the parents he's always had. Events still echo. Fate reasserts itself. There is still a Triwizard Cup, and a graveyard, and a body on the ground. But the Triwizard year plays out with Harry more integrated into the Order and Hogwarts community, less isolated by fame, more willing to question Dumbledore to his face about what the prophecy actually means. At the Ministry, he doesn't sneak out as an untrained child soldier. He leverages his role within a network of adults who finally see him as a partner, not a weapon. The Horcrux hunt and final battle are still brutal, but they are less a boy and his trauma against the world, and more a family-centered campaign against a system that has been feeding on broken children for generations. And that's the quiet moral humming under this AU. This isn't a story about love making a hero soft. It's about how love and stability make him more grounded, more questioning, and perhaps more dangerous to institutions that rely on desperation and loneliness to keep young heroes obedient. So, let's explore one last question together. How much of who Harry is has to come from suffering, and how much could have come from being cherished instead? And what does that answer demand from the world he's about to rebuild? The hidden costs of being raised by a legend. And here's where the warm light of this AU starts to throw longer shadows, because Dumbledore raising Harry himself isn't just a fairy tale rescue from the Dursleys. It's a strategic decision by a man who has already heard a prophecy and already decided the war will, in the end, hinge on a boy. This changes everything. Not because Dumbledore suddenly becomes cruel, but because he is still the same deeply flawed strategist who once left a baby on a doorstep for the greater good. In this timeline, he simply keeps the baby closer. What if the headmaster's office is both nursery and war room? What if the child toddling past the pensieve is also the child the Order whispers about in midnight meetings? Dumbledore holds Harry when he cries, teaches him to tie his shoes, tells him bedtime stories about the First War, but he is also quietly observing, measuring, nudging, Is Harry brave? Is he compassionate? Is he willing to sacrifice? This Harry grows up knowing that the greatest wizard of the age is watching his every moral choice. That means by the time he reaches Hogwarts proper, he isn't just Harry Potter. He's the headmaster's boy. Every teacher has an opinion before he sits his first exam. Every classmate has a script ready. Teacher's pet, future Auror, miniature Dumbledore. Make a brilliant move in Transfiguration, and it's proof of destiny. Lose his temper in defense, and it's whispered that maybe the chosen one isn't so pure after all. How do you make ordinary, messy mistakes when you've been raised in the eye of a prophecy? This isn't a story about a cozy boarding school anymore. Home is the castle. The man who tucks Harry in is also the man who expels other children. Detention is 3 floors down from where he eats breakfast. When Dumbledore trains him in Occlumency at 12, is that a grandfather teaching a beloved child to protect his mind? Or a general sharpening a weapon? The lines blur until Harry can't always tell where family ends and duty begins. Long term, that does damage even love can't entirely heal. Harry learns to question institutions, but does he ever fully learn to trust his own desires? When you've been told since infancy that you're important because of a war, how do you decide what you want when there isn't a war? Does he feel guilty wanting a quiet life when his guardian spent years shaping him into someone who runs toward danger? And what about forgiveness? In canon, Harry must forgive adults who lied to protect him. Here, he has to forgive an adult who shaped almost every hour of his growing up around a battle he didn't start. Maybe he understands the necessity. Maybe he even agrees. But because he understands, the betrayal cuts cleaner and deeper. So this AU doesn't fix Harry's life. It trades cupboard scars for different wounds. Less visible, more entangled with love. Which leaves us with a harder question. In times of crisis, what do we actually owe children? Their safety, their honesty, or their usefulness? And when the final battle comes, what happens if Harry finally decides that being a symbol is no longer enough? Why this AU matters: love, destiny, and the stories we tell. And this is where the AU stops being just clever logistics and starts asking something uncomfortably personal. If one man's choice can reroute Harry's whole timeline, what does that say about ours? How different would any of us be if the adults in our lives had made one braver, kinder, or more selfish decision at a door we never even knew existed? Because this isn't a story about swapping out one guardian for another and calling it a day. Putting Harry in Dumbledore's care forces us straight into the heart of the nature versus nurture question. Is Harry brave because of some immutable Potter core, or because, in this version, the first voice he remembers is Phoenix's song instead of Petunia's contempt? If your earliest memories are of McGonagall correcting your wand grip instead of Dudley stealing your dinner, what does courage even mean? In canon, Harry's heroism is framed as the alchemy of deprivation. He survives cruelty, so he becomes selfless. He is unloved, so he loves fiercely. This changes everything, not by erasing trauma, but by asking whether heroism has to be forged in misery to count. This Harry grows up knowing he is wanted. He learns legilimency before long division, because Dumbledore thinks he can be trusted with power. not because he has to prove he deserves basic care. That recenters the story around a boy whose willingness to sacrifice comes from being loved well, not from believing his own life is expendable. And then there's Dumbledore himself. Making him the one who tucks Harry into bed instead of the distant chess master in the tower doesn't let us off the hook. It tightens it. We see, daily, his capacity for tenderness. Hot chocolate after nightmares about green light, quiet evenings reading Transfiguration journals while Harry does homework in his office. But because he is still Dumbledore, we also see the line where mentorship blurs into manipulation. When he teaches Harry occlumency at 9, is he protecting a child or sharpening a weapon? When he withholds the full prophecy from his ward, it lands differently if he's the man who packed Harry's school trunk. That tension is exactly why this AU is so emotionally resonant. For many fans, imagining Harry never touching the inside of a cupboard, never flinching at a raised voice, is a healing fantasy. Phoenix song instead of Dudley's fists. Bedtime stories about the founders instead of hissed warnings about being a freak. It's comforting, yes, but it's not saccharine because Hogwarts' home comes with its own shadows. Whispered prophecies in the staff room, war maps under the lemon drops. Ultimately, this AU becomes a way to honor both boys at once. The canon Harry who survived despite everything, and the Dumbledore-raised Harry who could have thrived because someone chose him differently. Two answers to the same what-if, held together in one story about love, destiny, and the terrifying, beautiful power adults have when they stand at the doors children cannot open for themselves. From Phoenix song to comment section, your turn in the story. And now the question comes back to you. If we lay these two boys side by side, the canon child in the cupboard and the Dumbledore-raised child in the tower, what do you see? In your version of this timeline, does Dumbledore's choice make Harry more powerful, more morally grounded, or more dangerously shaped by the greatest chess player of the age? Is this Harry, a truer protector of the world, or a sharper weapon pointed exactly where Dumbledore intends? Think back through the moments we've walked together. Which image lodged under your ribs and refused to move? Was it the baby asleep in a transfigured cradle in the headmaster's quarters, lulled to sleep by Phoenix song instead of Dudley's tantrums? Was it the shrieking shack, where a Harry trained in occlumency and hard questions faces Sirius and Snape, with a completely different vocabulary for betrayal and forgiveness? Or was it the tower, with a boy who has rehearsed sacrifices theory now forced to enact it in practice? One steady because he's been preparing for this since childhood. Maybe it was the walk into the forest. In canon, Harry goes in carrying years of neglect and sudden love, half convinced that death is the only way he can protect his family. In this AU, he walks under the trees with Dumbledore's lessons in his bones, with a more precise understanding of Horcruxes, prophecy, and the Hallows. Does that knowledge make his choice more terrifying because he understands every angle, or less free because someone else has plotted the angles for him? So, let's explore the fault lines together. Should Dumbledore have told Harry the full prophecy much earlier, raising him not just as a child, but as a co-strategist? Do you think he should have tried harder to live through 6th year in this version, clinging to life, not for the Hallows, but because abandoning the boy he raised feels unconscionable? And the hardest one, did he ever have the right to raise Harry at all, knowing he was also raising him for slaughter, however he dressed it up in love and lemon drops. And if this isn't your preferred what if, which guardian would you put at that crossroads instead? Imagine Snape, ordered by Dumbledore to take the child home and confronted every morning by Lily's eyes at his breakfast table. Imagine Sirius cleared early and raising Harry from age 1, turning Grimmauld Place into a chaotic, half-healed sanctuary. Imagine McGonagall as guardian, bringing him up between tartan armchairs and transfiguration essays, teaching him discipline before destiny. Which timeline do you want us to follow next? Because this isn't a story about one definitive answer. This changes everything precisely because each of you carries a different Harry in your head. Tell us in the comments which moments hit you hardest, which choices you'd rewrite, which relationships you want to see tested. Your theories and debates turn that comment section into a kind of modern room of requirement, filling up with whatever the fandom most needs to imagine next, and quietly shaping where this series goes from here, closing the door to the Headmaster's quarters. And in a way, that's where we have to end up, isn't it? Not in the middle of a duel or a prophecy, but back in a quiet room, with one small boy in an oversized armchair in Dumbledore's office, swinging his feet and staring up at a man who has just decided his entire life. We opened on that image before we knew what it meant. Now we do. Now we can look at that child and see the whole timeline unfurling around him. The stone locked away downstairs while he toddles past the gargoyle. The chamber of secrets, whispering beneath his bedtime. Sirius Black's name spoken in low, careful tones over cocoa instead of shouted in fear across a Quidditch pitch. This changes everything. Not because danger disappears, but because danger arrives in a world where he is already loved, already believed, already protected. In canon, Harry is forged in neglect. His first lessons are that he is unwanted, inconvenient, expendable. This Harry grows up learning that his questions matter, that his nightmares are taken seriously, that the greatest wizard of the age will put down a stack of ministry parchment to listen when he says, "Something feels wrong." What if that's the difference that echoes through every book? What if Dumbledore turning left instead of right on Privet Drive means the stone is never a lonely child's secret burden, but a shared problem discussed at a staff table while Harry colours quietly in the corner? What if the chamber isn't proof that adults don't listen, but the moment a boy raised on honesty demands the full truth about Tom Riddle and gets it? One decision, one turn in the dark, reverberates outward. It reshapes his friendship with Ron and Hermione because they're not rescuing a boy who has never been chosen. They're joining someone who has always been wanted and is determined to extend that safety outward. It alters Snape's role because he can't reduce Harry to James's ghost when he's watched Dumbledore teach the boy Occlumency at 9 and seen him bring Fawkes treats in the evenings. It even changes Voldemort's war, because the weapon he fears is not an isolated martyr, but the center of a network Dumbledore has been quietly building since Harry's first steps echoed on the stone floor. This isn't a story about erasing trauma. It's a story about where the healing starts, about a hero forged in care instead of scarcity, and what it means when the boy who lived never has to ask whether he was meant to be loved. So picture one last image. The war is over. The portraits are dozing. Fawkes's perch is empty or newly filled, depending on how merciful you want this universe to be. And in that same armchair sits an older Harry Scar, faded, hands ink-stained from grading essays or drafting policy. Head of Gryffindor House, defense professor, maybe even headmaster. He leans back, listening to the soft rustle of the castle, and he knows, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who has seen too many timelines almost go wrong, that he grew up at home. Because whether he was a Weasley in one universe or Dumbledore's ward in this one, every version of Harry who makes it here has been shaped by the moment an adult chose him and kept choosing him. So, if you want to keep exploring what-ifs like this, what if one choice on a dark street or in a quiet office rewrites everything? Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episode in this series. And as you click away, sit with this lingering question. If one wizard's decision can change the whole shape of Harry's life, what choices in your own might be quietly doing the same for someone else right now, without you even realizing it?